Telling me just from looking at the people who are out there. I've been working with this system so many years. Well, I'm going to hand it over to, you want me to just get things started now that we've determined who's where? For those of you who don't know me, I'm Julie Eklund. Welcome again for the second day of the accountability meetings. I'm the Assistant Commissioner in Strategic Planning and Funding. I had the opportunity to lead these meetings for years when I was Deputy Assistant Commissioner and Director of Planning, but now you're very fortunate to have with you Jenna Cullinane-Heggie. Dr. Heggie has been with the coordinating board for almost 3 years now, and we've been really happy to have her. She's done some wonderful work with the regional strategies that are going on that you all worked on yesterday in terms of our 60 by 30 tech state plan. I can no longer say new state plan because we're already 3 years in, and you're going to see some new data today that's pretty exciting in terms of, I think we're just missing an element or two, so we're really getting there in terms of seeing where we are, but we're getting close to 2020, sorry. So it's kind of exciting to see what we're doing in terms of moving the needle. You'll be hearing later today about how some of you really have moved the needle and been real improvers in terms of what you've been doing related to the accountability metrics. And I know I got the opportunity to be here yesterday for the 2-year colleges and hear those presentations, and they were pretty impressive. So I'm looking forward to that today. So I'll be back with you at 11 for that. But again, welcome. Really happy to have you all here. This is important work. We really want to make sure we're using our accountability system. I know with the new redesign, it's taken folks a little while to adjust. We're still working on some improvements, but I think it's really been valuable to have, especially the raw data that's there in the interactive, to have the very clean, clear metrics. I know we dropped a lot of metrics, but now I think we're really able to focus on what's most important in terms of the metrics that are there. And trust me, a lot of people are in that system and use it. When I'm over at the Capitol, I hear about those metrics, I hear about those numbers. People are watching and care, and they certainly care a whole lot about how we're doing in terms of the 60 by 30 text plan. So you all do very important work in terms of leading institutional efforts to try to reach our goals, and certainly those of you who are in the institutional research area, and make sure that we get our correct data and can really watch and look at real numbers in terms of where we're going. That's very, very important. So we appreciate your efforts to report accurate and timely data to us. So with that said, I'm going to hand it over to Dr. Cullinane Heggie, who will lead you through this morning, and I will be back to hear about the wonderful improvers who are going to be presenting at 11. Thanks.
All right, good morning, everyone. Good morning. I hope that everyone had a good evening last night and maybe got some good Austin local fare. And thanks for joining us on a two-day piece of the accountability meetings this year. We tried this format last year and we got some really good feedback on it. So I hope that you enjoyed the regional work yesterday. And then today, I'm looking forward to having time just with this sector to talk about some of the progress by sector, some of the key indicators that we're following as part of the accountability system. And as Julie mentioned, we've started leveraging our accountability data in new ways and want to draw attention to some of those institutions that have been making big jumps in the last couple of years. So we'll get to that towards the end of the day. But let me start with a little bit of the housekeeping things for the day. For folks who are joining us online, you are probably looking at the webcast and you've joined via the conference call line. If there is any background noise, it blasts over the whole boardroom. So if you would be very careful to just mute your phone if you're not trying to talk. And if you do want to send a question, and it doesn't seem like we've come up for air for a minute, just go ahead and email Luis Martinez. On the screen there, you can see his email address, luis.martinez@thhecb.state.tx.us. That would be the easiest way for us to field your questions. And the other conference call information is up there. I think that's that piece. If you haven't been here before, hopefully if you were here yesterday, you saw that there are restrooms kind of out this way, coffee and water over here. You'll see on the agenda there are no specific breaks on there. You can go the marathon, or you are most welcome. This is going to be a casual affair. Please feel free to grab whatever you need, take a break when you need. If you need to take a call or you need to use the restroom, just go ahead and do that at any time. And we're going to try and be very efficient in our 3 hours together this morning and to get you out on time. So I just wanted to start by saying that I think there's a lot of good work going on, and we're going to hear about some of it today. But you'll see in the state numbers that we continue to make good progress towards the goals and targets of 60 by 30 text. There are some areas where we're not making as much progress as we need to, and do have to continue to increase and accelerate the progress that's happening. But it's not surprising kind of where we are in the plan. We're a couple of years in, so it's not new anymore. But we always talk about that we don't anticipate that we'll have exactly the same percentage growth in every single year. That some of these efforts that are underway, we'll see the fruits of that labor pay off later in the life of the plan. We have very good representation this year. We're so pleased that so many were able to join yesterday. We were up over 160 folks yesterday and close to 60 this morning. So we really appreciate that so many institutions have brought folks to be here in person. We know we've got some online folks too, but part of what we want to accomplish is making sure that there is a forum for cross-institutional collaboration. And that's one of the reasons we're having you sit together by peer group this morning, is we're going to have some time for a little break for conversation and discussion, and we want you to be with folks and build community with others, kind of like, in some ways, like institutions. And we also want to make sure that when we're talking about these data, that we're not just looking at the data, but we're thinking about how does the data inform action, and want to make sure that we're creating space for those kinds of discussions. Like we keep saying, it's not enough to know, we have to know what to do. So we're going to be talking a lot about student outcomes, of course, and with a big emphasis on equity. This is not new, but something that we are very committed to and want to talk at every opportunity about how our subpopulations are doing. So we'll spend time talking about our male students, our Hispanic students, African American students, economically disadvantaged students in particular today, and so you'll hear that kind of theme come out. So I want you to feel free to stop, ask questions of me, ask questions of each other. Again, I want this to be kind of a conversational morning and day. So with that, let's go ahead and move into some introductions. I know we have a lot of folks here, but I do think it helps when we know who's in the room. So if you don't mind, if we could grab a microphone. And what I'd like to do is kind of do it by peer group. So if you don't mind starting over here with comprehensive, if folks would just let us know. And while that's coming around, let me finish introducing folks from the coordinating board that are here. We have Dr. Chelsea Moore here up on the dais. She is a program director in our strategic planning division, and you'll be hearing from her a little bit later. She runs several of our accountability measures, and so she's going to be talking about some of the sector-specific information for you all. Diane Ergel up here, I called her the czar of the accountability system yesterday. I don't know if she liked that or not, but that she's maybe the queen bee of the accountability system. So she makes sure that everything is right and that it all comes out in excellent timely fashion this year. So anyway, if you have any questions, she is the one to ask about methodology and data and so forth. Yeah, Elizabeth Shivers over here, she has done a great job of organizing these events this year. And she is very new. We stole her from Navarro College a couple of months ago, and she has hit the ground running, and she's leading our almanac and also these accountability meetings. So you'll be hearing from her in a little bit, I'm sure, as well. In the back, Chris Doherty, another program director, and he's been working on a lot of our student debt and excess hours information, and I think that's all we have from the coordinating board in the room at the moment. Others may jump in. Oh, I'm sorry. Oh, Josie Brunner, sorry. Senior research evaluator from our research and evaluation division, and she works on a lot of our high school to higher ed research. All right, so with that, I will pass it over here to Morgan to start us off.
Morgan Carter, Tarleton State University, Institutional Effectiveness.
Mark Morvant, Tarleton State University, Associate Vice President for Academic Administration.
Michael Haynes, Tarleton State University, Institutional Research.
Mark Guidry, Stephen F. Austin, State University, Associate Provost.
David Allen, Texas A&M International University, Associate Vice President for Institutional Assessment, Research, and Planning.
Stephen Duffy, Texas A&M International University, and I'm an Associate Provost.
Craig Escamilla, Lamar University, Executive Director for Retention and Student Success.
Greg Marsh, Lamar University, Institutional Research.
Shiva Jaganathan, University of Texas at Austin, Institutional Research.
Carolyn Conrad, University of Texas at Austin, Associate Vice Provost, Enrollment Management.
Cindy Strawn, the University of Texas at Tyler, Institutional Research.
Good morning, I'm Wade Schaefer, West Texas A&M University, and I'm the provost there.
Susan Allen, West Texas A&M University Assistant VPAA.
Brandy Hawkins, Angelo State University. Oh, accountability, sorry.
Sarah Bowden, Assistant Vice President for Enrollment Management at UT Tyler.
Good morning, Hector Govea, the University of Texas Permian Basin Institutional Research.
Mike Farley, University of Texas Permian Basin Undergraduate Success.
John Indiazzi, UT Permian Basin Undergraduate Success.
Donna Lang, Texas A&M University at Galveston.
Pat Cutchins, University of Houston, Clear Lake, Institutional Effectiveness.
Good morning, Paul Turcott, Director of Institutional Research and Assessment at Texas A&M University, Central Texas.
Molly Albert, University of Texas Arlington, Student Affairs.
Kathy Matthew, Associate Vice President, Academic Affairs, University of Houston, Clear Lake.
All right, we'll swing over here.
Mark Stout, University of Houston, Victoria, Institutional Research.
Good morning, Risa McGuire with the Council of Public University Presidents and Chancellors.
Sharon Bailey at University of Houston, Victoria, Institutional Research and Effectiveness.
Hello, Dan Hubbard, Director of Data Management, University of North Texas.
Morning, Jason Simon, Assistant Vice President for Data Analytics and Institutional Research at University of North Texas.
Courtney Burkeen, an Associate Dean of Undergraduate Education and Academic Affairs at UT Dallas.
Steve Wilkerson, University of Texas San Antonio, Institutional Research.
Lisa Blazer, UT San Antonio, Strategic Enrollment.
Scott Mertz, University of Texas Arlington, Executive Director, Enrollment Management.
Miguel Ramos, University of Houston, Interim Associate Provost for Institutional Research.
Vedaraman Sriraman, Associate Vice President for Academic Affairs, Texas State University.
Joe Meyer, Assistant VP for Institutional Research, Texas State University.
And Beth Waste, Associate Vice President for Institutional Effectiveness, Texas State.
Good morning, Patrick Hughes, Vice Provost, University Programs and Student Success at Texas Tech University.
Vicki West, Institutional Research, Texas Tech.
Good morning, Dan Su, A&M Commerce, Institutional Effectiveness and Research.
Madeline Justice, A&M Commerce, Associate Provost.
Jaya Goswami, Texas A&M University, Kingsville, Associate Vice President for Academic Affairs.
I'm Brian Loft from the Provost Office at Sam Houston State University.
Christy Bean, Assistant Vice President for Student Affairs at Sam Houston State University.
Good morning, Katie Bontrager, Texas A&M Corpus Christi. I have Planning, Institutional Research, and Special Projects.
Good morning, everyone. Lucelma Canales. I oversee student success at UTRGV.
Good morning. I'm Laura Saenz. I'm an Associate Vice President in the Division of Academic Affairs.
Susan Brown. I'm the Assistant Vice President for Strategic Analysis and Institutional Reporting at UTRGV.
Good morning, Barbara Lerner, Texas Women's University, Vice Provost, Undergraduate Studies.
Joshua Adams, Texas Women's University, Assistant Provost for Student Success.
Am I the last one? All right. Good morning, Mark Hamner, Vice Provost, Institutional Research and Improvement.
Oh, actually, I thought. All right, well, thank you. I know that takes a bit of time, but I think it's great to refresh maybe some newer faces. Raise your hand if this is your first accountability meeting. Look at that, very nice. Okay, good. So I think this is a good thing. So for a long time, we had really institutional research focus, and I think that we kind of need the blend of these many different roles in the room. I think this is a really good thing. So we've got folks kind of with deep data knowledge who think about your institutional data all the time. They will ask different kinds of questions than the other folks in the room, but I think it's nice to have a blend of kind of student success, academic affairs, data all in the same room. So anyway, very happy to have you all here. So what we're going to do today is first jump into the 60 by 30 progress report and give you an update on where we are with the latest data with our 2018 data on the goals and targets. And then we'll have some time to talk about marketable skills. That continues to be an area where people want some additional information, so we'll have a little bit of time with Rex Peoples and Ginger Gossman to talk about that. We have a little bit of data to share that we asked for in the accountability system this year related to that goal. We'll go into some of the nuts and bolts of what's happening with the system, just a short update on some of the things that we've changed over the last year. We are very happy that we're kind of in our third year. It was very smooth on our end. When you start a new system, you know the first year is not perfect and the second year is a little better, and then by the third year, hopefully you've really got it down. So this was our most seamless go at this in the last couple of years. So hopefully it was seamless on your end as well. In terms of, then we'll move into a little bit of an introduction on completion and transfer. Those were the key areas that we used for our top improver analysis this year, and then we'll end with the institutional presentations. So what we're hoping to accomplish in the next 3 hours, or actually started yesterday, so these are kind of the broad meeting objectives, is one, we want folks to leave feeling knowledgeable about state and institutional progress towards the state goals and targets. We also want to make sure that folks leave knowledgeable about institutional strategies that are supporting completion outcomes like graduation rates as well as transfer outcomes. Number 3, we want to make sure that participants feel that they've strengthened their connections with their peer groups as well as their regional work. So that was from yesterday. And then also understand those regional targets and become knowledgeable about the institutional completion target component for their region. So we'll come check in on those at the end of the day. All right, so moving into the progress report. This was another good year overall for 60 by 30 techs. In particular, we had strong numbers, and I'm sure you dug into this in your data packets yesterday, likely for your region, but you saw overall that we moved up to 43.5% this year, so 1.3 percentage point increase is a 1.2 percentage point increase this year, following a 1.3 percentage point increase last year, is good news and about where we need to be each year of the plan to hit that 60% goal. So we know that that's a combination of the completions that we are conferring in the state from our institutions of higher education, but also a reflection of our strong economy. We're bringing lots of people into the state of Texas. There are lots of good jobs that demand higher levels of education, and we're seeing that trend continue. Completions, on the other hand, we saw positive growth. We're up to 341,000, an increase of 2.2% this year, but this was a softer year for completion. So last year we were up closer to 4% increase, and that, you can see, 3.9 is about where we need to be each year of the plan. So again, when we see kind of that softer year, you'll see that that effect kind of trickled down into all of our target population areas as well. So Hispanic increased about 3.9%. We're almost close to 116,000 completions for our Hispanic students this year. Only 1.4% increase for our African American completions this year. You can see male was increased but modest, same story here. But for our economically disadvantaged completions, that's the one where really particularly stuck out to me this year, that the increase was less than 300 statewide. So this is an area we're really keeping an eye on and are going to continue to dig into the data that we have available to take a look at this. You'll see I'll show you the sectors breakout in just a minute. So the universities did a bit better on some of these. That we really saw some of the biggest changes in the 2-year sector at the associate's degree level, but still a softer year for the universities as well. When we look at the next one, high school to higher education, the direct enrollment of students moving from high school when they graduate in the spring, moving into higher education the following fall, you'll see that we don't have a new number on that yet. So 52.3% was last year, and that was the first kind of uptick we saw after several years of decline. So we will have to wait and see. We get that data from TEA later in another month or so. So we'll update you when that's available. For marketable skills, as I said, the big goal of identifying marketable skills for all of your programs is kind of the overarching part of the goal, and we'll talk about that when Rex and Ginger come in a little bit. But we do follow one numerical target related to this goal, and it's the percent of students that we find working or enrolled 1 year after they complete a credential with you. So we look in the unemployment insurance wage records, and we look in our higher education enrollment data, and we say, are they doing one of those two things the year following? And you could say our maintenance goal there is to stay at 80%, and we're doing well in this domain. We're just under 80% with just some small fluctuations, but in good shape on that one. We're also in good shape when it comes to the student debt goal. I shared this yesterday that I was at a conference recently, and Evan Smith from the Texas Tribune was there, and he's very colorful when he talks about all things policy related, and he was kind of riffing on 60 by 30 techs, and so he was saying, well, the good news is that higher ed has a North Star, and they've put out some big ambitious goals, and this is a really good thing, and legislators like it. A lot have latched on to this. He said, compared to TEA and TWC don't have these same kinds of North Stars out there, so everyone's kind of looking to 60 by 30 techs. But he said all the goals are not equally sexy. Some of these goals, completion, sexy. Student debt, the idea is sexy, but I didn't know there was going to be math on this test. Not sexy. So he said, you know, debt as a percentage of wage, I've got to divide things, very complicated. So anyway, I know no one in this room has any trouble with this, but of course we're looking at every individual student, how much debt they have, and their first year wage. So we look at debt as a percentage of that first year wage, and then we line all those students up, and we look for the median student. And we want that median student to be at no more than 60% debt as a percent of their first year wage. And so in that regard, you'll see we're at 59%, so we're doing well. We want no more than 60, right? So we want that to kind of be the ceiling. And so 59%, we're in good shape there. I think one of the brightest spots in this review is excess semester credit hours. We had a 2 semester credit hour decrease statewide. So that's a big decrease. And we actually saw progress. Both the 2-year publics and the 4 years went down too. So that's, you know, across the board, we're seeing improvements. And we're also seeing improvements, and we'll talk a little bit about this in a minute, both among native students who start with and stay with you through graduation, and some decreases among your transfer populations, although there continues to be a big disparity across those two groups. And we'll look at that in a little bit. And then the last one here is the percent of undergraduates completing with debt. Our aim is that no more than 50% of students graduate with debt. And if you just read the newspapers and you maybe weren't in higher education all the time, you would think that every student has debt and every student has $100,000 of debt. And we know that's not the case. So we have, you know, fewer than half. This year we were at 45.8% of our students statewide with some amount of debt when they completed. So we've seen this number go down. And so there is one story where this is a good thing. We have fewer students taking out debt. But there's also, and this is observational, not correlation or causation at all. But when I look at the decreases that we see in our economically disadvantaged student completions, and I see that lower percentages of students are taking out debt, it does raise a question for me about whether students are investing enough in higher education. Do we have enough of our economically disadvantaged students coming in, taking out the right amount of debt, not too much debt, but the right amount of debt to invest in their future and their skill development and so forth to move out into the workforce? So that's something that gives me, you know, a pause and something that we're going to be looking into further. And then here's the exact same metrics here. Now I'm just showing you the public universities. So what you can see here is that our public universities, from their the associated completions of, we look at certificates, associates, bachelor's, and master's, right? So these are not all of your completions, but these are the completions relevant to the 60 by 30 text plan. That you're up to 150,539 this year. So that was good progress, 4% increase for this sector. But you can see with the actually very strong Hispanic completions improvement, so up 7.5%. That's about where we need to be statewide, and if everyone had done that, we would be in good shape. But that, but particularly strong for the universities this year. You can see African American and male completions up about 4%, 3%. And economically disadvantaged up about 2.2%. So that's about it's about half of where we need to be, or actually a little less, even less than that. So I'm going to pause in a minute and have you talk to your folks around you, next to you, behind you, to talk a little bit about sort of your observations on what you think is going on and what you're seeing at your institution related to economically disadvantaged students and helping to move them towards completion. But you can see with just finishing out this table for marketable skills, working enrolled about 74%. Usually our community colleges and tier colleges are a little above 80 or a little below 80, and we can average out to it. So again, statewide, we're in good shape. You can see that decrease from 15 to 14 to 13 in the excess semester credit hours, and just under 60% of your students are leaving with some level of debt. So keep in mind the HRIs get averaged into our 4-year numbers as well. They're not here today, but we also have our public 2 years combined when we look at our statewide numbers. So again, we're not looking for every sector to be at 50%. We're looking for, again, across statewide. It's not every institution or every individual or anything like that. It's when we look kind of across and bring them all together. So let me pause there and have you find a person next to you, 3 people next to you. If you don't have a partner, turn around and grab onto another group. And just 3 or 4 minutes and talk about your experience with economically disadvantaged students and what, if you've looked at your institutional numbers, you know what they look like, or just in general in terms of these sector-wide trends. What do you think is happening, and what does this data spark for you? Okay. Thank you for digging in. So I heard a couple of things, and let me start by asking, is there anything that you thought was a particularly interesting point or puzzling point that you wanted to share with the group? All right. Yeah, Mark. So because we've got the webcast, folks, I have to get you to use the microphone.
At both Tarleton and my institution, SFA, we have seen a marked drop in African-American male students over the last few years, and we really don't know why. So it's a puzzle.
Okay. Thank you. Anybody else? Well, I'll tell you, I heard a couple of things, and we'll say they're anonymous things. So one thing was around kind of post-recession. So this is something that we will be looking at, especially we were talking to the two-year colleges yesterday. This came up that 2010, 2012 was the peak of when we look at Pell applications in the state. They were very high and then started to trail off. And this year was actually the first year we saw a decrease in Pell applications. And so one thing that could be happening is that we've got kind of that huge population of students have kind of come through the system, those folks who came in 2012-ish at the peak, and they've maybe moved through the system. So maybe we have a smaller population overall in terms of who's coming in. But we also know that 60% of the students in K-12 are on free and reduced price lunch in the state. So there's a massive population to serve, but in terms of the pipeline of who's already in. So that's just one thing to think about. So you might look at your numbers of students with Pell, look back at 2010, 2012. You may see higher numbers than what you see now. Another question was around some of the exemptions, like the Hazelwood exemption, and thinking about are institutional resources being pulled in ways that may be away from our neediest students for other kinds of requirements. And so there was an interesting discussion about that and the trade-offs that may be happening based on policy. And then there was also a question about use of FAFSA data. For folks who were at TARE, there was a presentation that talked about really new interpretations, FERPA interpretations about being able to use FAFSA for institutional analysis. And what was presented was that basically there's no acceptable use of FAFSA information for institutional use. And so that raised a big red flag for me. That's not currently the understanding that the agency has. So we're actually working with our general counsel. I wanted to give people an update. If you've been alarmed by something that you heard at TARE, we're looking into it. I don't have a definitive answer for you, but some of the new interpretations have focused in my reading of it as release of FAFSA information or Pell eligibility information to third-party providers, people who might offer third-party scholarships, and that's identifiable student-level information. The use of FAFSA in aggregate and for institutional improvement and effectiveness, I have not heard that is off limits. So I think to be determined, but again, we're working with our general counsel, and I'll provide that information to you all when we have it. But I want to make sure we get in front of it before we kind of go in a direction that doesn't allow us to look at our low-income students and think about their needs. So a couple of things. Anything else people want to add on this topic? Yes. Yeah.
Hi, Miguel from University of Houston. We actually had a conference last week where some data were presented regarding debt. And I wonder if there is a correlation between, or a relationship between economically disadvantaged and debt. Because I know I've had conversations with students as part of other studies where if you're economically disadvantaged to begin with, the thinking about debt is different. So I know that if you're from an academically advantaged or an economically advantaged situation, you might think, well, I'm going to go into debt with $200,000 to be a doctor, but I'm going to be a doctor. So that's worth the investment. Whereas I've had conversations with students actually here in Austin as part of a study where I would talk to students and they're like, well, I'd rather work a full-time job and not take a loan than do that. And they end up not finishing, or the completion rate is terrible. And there were some data last week where that played out. Like as you get higher on the income scale from your background, you don't have as many issues completing as if you are below that line.
Yeah, I think the trade-off between debt and work or other kinds of arrangements, and so we're also seeing things like food insecurity and housing insecurity. I think we're starting to understand the economically disadvantaged student experience a bit better than we did even 2-3 years ago. And so I think absolutely there are different ways of approaching how to finance higher education, and there is clearly some support that would help, right?
One of the things that we're looking at is percentage of unmet need and looking at retention rates based off a percentage of unmet need. But that requires some pretty intricate collaboration with our financial aid offices in order to ensure that we validate the data. We understand what does that mean, when does it mean. Increasingly in financial aid data structures, it's about timing, less about dollars. And so we're definitely looking to exploit that relationship a bit more from an analytical perspective. The other thing that we're also noticing is a continuing trend of male difficulty across all ethnic categories, age categories. When we look at our national survey of student engagement, we see there's statistically significant differences in engagement and high impact practices between males and females. And we're also seeing differences in retention rates, graduation rates, and GPA. So clearly there is something going on, and I think the economic disadvantaged label probably even magnifies that further.
Just a point on that, that when we look at our high school to higher ed and we're examining the decreases, it was actually low-income white males who were the lowest percentage. And so absolutely the interaction of race and gender and economic status are, they play out in different ways kind of across those three interactions. Okay, I'm going to move us forward, but thank you for that robust discussion, and I think very thought-provoking. And if you're doing interesting analysis in this area, we would love to keep thinking about this. So we've talked internally. We've got different analysts who are looking at different pieces of this, and we thought just internally we should all put our brains together in terms of what pieces are we seeing in terms of grad rates or other student debt measures, and wanting to kind of triangulate. But I would welcome a broader discussion about that. So if you're doing analysis from an institutional perspective, we would love to be continuing to talk with you about that. Okay, so I'm going to hand it over to Chelsea Moore. She's going to take us through some of the sector-specific data, a couple of different measures in the accountability system.
So good morning, everyone. As Jenna mentioned, I'm going to highlight a few additional data points for universities that are available in our accountability system. So this table shows the most recent fall enrollment data for public universities by gender and race ethnicity. So we saw overall fall enrollment increased by 3.4%. Since 2016, so these are all two-year percentage changes. And we saw the biggest increases were really among the Hispanic and Asian populations, both with over a 10% increase over this two-year period. And this is just a more detailed look at university completions. So this breaks out completions by degree type. And it also includes our doctoral and professional degrees, which, as Jenna mentioned, are not included in those plan numbers that she went over earlier. So you can see there was an increase among all degree types across degree type, both in number and percentage. It was really the bachelor's degrees that were driving the growth in the sector. And taking a closer look at our target populations, so here we can compare male and female completion. We saw that females, as we just talked about, had a higher rates of completion than males. They were at 9.3% versus 6% for males. But what was interesting to me was where we saw the growth. So from this, you can see that among bachelor's degrees, males actually had a slightly higher rate of growth than females. They're also a little overrepresented in the doctoral degrees. And they also had a higher percentage increase in the doctoral level. But it was really the master's level where we saw the big difference. So females increased over 10% in master's degree completions, while males actually decreased 3.5%. And we also saw among the professional degrees a decrease among males, while females saw an increase over this time period. And just quickly going through the other target populations, so African American student completions here, you can see across degree type, they did increase, but as we mentioned, it's not at the levels we need if we're going to make our 2030 targets. And Hispanic completions also increased overall, but we did see a dip in the doctoral degrees. So hopefully we see some improvement there going forward. And next, I just wanted to highlight a couple of measures related to transfer. I know we're going to talk about this a little later, but it's been a big topic of discussion, and I wanted to point out a couple of measures that we have in our accountability system. So here you can see the graduation rate of two-year college students who transfer to a university. And a quick note on the methodology here. So it's only Graduation rate only includes those who earn a bachelor's degree, so it doesn't include those who earn an associate's or lower. Also note that it's the 4-year graduation rate from the point of transfer. So we look at from the point of transfer, do they graduate in 4 years? And then to find SEH accrued at a 2-year, we go back an additional 6 years from that point of transfer. And you can see that we break this into whether they took less than 30 semester credit hours at a 2-year versus 30 or more. And both groups saw increases over this 2-year time period, a 4.1 percentage point increase for the less than 30 group, and a 1.6 percentage point increase for the 30 or more group. And it does include the counts here, so if you want to add those together, you can get the overall graduation rate for transfer students, which was 56.9%, up 2.1 percentage points over this 2-year period. And Jenna mentioned we were going to talk about a more detailed look at the excess semester credit hours. So this just breaks it out by whether they started at the same institution or started at another institution. And as Jenna mentioned, we see decreases in both groups. So it went from 8 to 6 in the same group in 24 to 23 in that other group. But we do still see a big gap between the same and other group, with transfer students taking on a lot of more excess semester credit hours attempted. And finally, I just wanted to highlight that the accountability system also includes several sector-specific measures that don't necessarily fall into the 4 goals. And these can be found under the sector-specific other on our accountability website. So this just shows research expenditures by source of funds. So here we can just see that these increases were really driven by federal and institutional funds. Research expenditures funded by state appropriations really remained pretty flat over this time period. And those funded by private funds actually decreased over the last 2 years. So I'm going to stop here and ask if anybody has any questions, comments on any of the accountability data.
Thank you, Elizabeth. On the slide before this, where you're talking about the excess semester credit hours, and I apologize if I get into a question that you don't have the answer to, but do we know how many of those 23 hours that are in excess for 2018 for those who came in from another institution are non-academic hours versus academic hours?
That's a good question.
Thank you.
Jenna? Chris, do you know? Yeah, so we haven't looked at it, but definitely something we can look at and get back to you.
Yeah, we've got, we could disaggregate by major and all kinds of other things. What we'd be interested in, since I'm doing an analysis of excess credit hours at the moment, is if anybody wants to communicate research questions on this subject that you'd like us to look into, kind of now's the time to do that communication while we're kind of doing the analysis in the next 4 to 6 months. That would be really handy. If you're interested, you can get my card and you can communicate with me directly, or you can communicate with anybody else that you have a card for.
Anyone else? Any questions? Okay. Do you want to introduce?
Sure. All right. So The next thing we're going to do is jump into the Marketable Skills update. And so I'm going to welcome Ginger Gossman to come on up and share with us a little bit about this piece of the plan. Are you solo today? Okay. Well, Ginger's the star of the show anyway. Rex is just the side act.
Well, I'll take it. Thanks. Good morning. Thanks for making the trip down to Austin to hear about our updates. Hi, Susan. Hi, Paul. And thank you for hiring staff away from the coordinating board, our really good staff. We really appreciate it. No, we consider it an honor when our folks get placed in the field. So this morning, I am going to give a little bit of a background on Marketable Skills Goal. Oh, my name is Ginger Gossman. I always forget that part. Because we know there are some folks watching from home who may not have been oriented on this goal. And it's a nice reminder for us to remember why we did this in the first place. So the goal actually reads that by 2030, all graduates from Texas public institutions will have graduated from programs with identified marketable skills. So what we are asking you to do is think about the skills your students are already learning in your academic or technical programs. Figure out what those are, talk with your employer partners to make sure that the language is calibrated between what you are calling a skill and what the skills they are putting in their job postings, and then write those out and share them with students. So again, we're really thinking about the skills that you're already providing in your programs. This is not a call for a change to your curriculum. When we were working on the higher education strategic plan, headlines were riddled with things like this, and really sort of attacking the value of college, the value of higher education, and was it worth students' money, and was it worth the debt, and was it worth their time? And the message at the time, this is about 5 years ago, was really leaning towards no. Evidence is, employers are not telling us that they're getting what they need, so it's not worth it. Why are students going? And the Marketable Skills Goal was a direct attempt to challenge that narrative, because data clearly show, if you see our almanac every year, that higher education is most definitely worth the money. It is worth the debt. It is worth the time, because if you have a higher education credential, you're going to make much more over your lifetime than someone who only has a high school education. So just a reminder that the Marketable Skills Goal is really tied into the value of higher education. So why this matters for students? So every year UCLA conducts a study of freshmen. It's a nationally represented survey. And one of the questions they ask is, what is the most important reason you've come to college? And every year over 85% respond to get a better job. So it's a reasonable expectation that the graduates we produce, the graduates you produce, are in a position to market themselves to get a good job, to get a better job. So what are marketable skills? When we first rolled out this goal, that was the most common question. And to be fair, our response has always been something very high level and not particularly. We didn't want to hone in on a response. And the reason why we didn't is because we wanted to give you the opportunity, the freedom to identify how you would define a marketable skill so you could take ownership of it. Because you know your students and you know the skills they need to connect with your employers, the employers that you work with. But at the high level, it is a skill valued by employers. It can be cognitive, applied. It can be curricular, co-curricular, extracurricular. So we have two targets under this goal. The first one is that by 2020, which is next year, you will have created a process to identify the skills. You will have implemented the process to identify the skills, and you will have figured out a way to update that on a regular basis. And so this piece about updating it on a regular basis is really important to the goal, because we don't always know what skills are coming, what skills are going to be entering into the workforce. I went to a conference recently about the future of work, which, as I'm sure many of you have heard, that's a major topic nationally. What is the future of work? What's it going to look like? And one of the skills that was presented as being in high demand now is that of corporate responsibility and finding new hires who understand the role of corporate responsibility and can integrate that into their daily work. So that's not something that I have been thinking about in terms of preparing our graduates for the future of work. And I don't know if that's something that you've been thinking about, but again, so what that means, corporate responsibility, is really someone who's going to think about their work in the context of environmental issues and of equity issues. It's skills that you're already teaching your students, but it's kind of repackaged in a new way so that in a job posting, someone may be asking for corporate responsibility, and you just have to help students figure out what that means, because you're already teaching those things. You just may not be packaging it in that exact same way. And so that's why we really would hope that your process includes that conversation with employers so that you're calibrating between what you are already teaching students and how they want those skills packaged for their new hires. The second target is a metric that we've been collecting for a long time and indeed publicly posting it for a long time. It's been about 80%, really 6 or 7 years now. And we just want to follow where that goes, because that number could go up or the number could go down. So if it went up, that could be a great thing for the Texas economy, because we're only able to track our graduates into our Texas workforce data. So hey, if that moves up to 90%, maybe that's a great piece of information, because we're hiring more of our talent in state and it's helping our economy grow. But what if it's because, Amazon 4, wherever that exists in the future, shut down and all of our graduates had to move back and they're getting low-paying jobs? So could be good, could be not so good. We just need to understand what's happening. And if the number went down, that may not be great for the Texas economy, but what if Amazon 24 opens up in Canada and all our graduates are moving there and they're making excellent wages? It's great for our students. So again, we want to follow the number. It's a maintenance target just to figure out what's happening. So what are some of the things that we as a coordinating body have done to try to advance this goal? We've hosted a couple of Marketable Skills conferences. Hopefully some of you have attended those. We developed a Marketable Skills guidelines tool to help institutions think about how to get started. How many of you have seen that document, those guidelines? Okay, great. We have plans to reroute that as well. And it just kind of gives some practical ideas on how you can get started. How do you start that conversation on your campus and then with your industry partners? We also created a career readiness handbook. Oops. I'll talk about that more in a minute. So the guidelines here are the major pieces of the major sections in the guidelines. Again, when we first rolled this out, one of the common questions was, could we just use our learning outcomes? And I'm going to channel Rex Peoples here. Learning outcomes are a great place to start, but but you're not done. So learning outcomes, that language is how we talk to each other. It's how educators talk to each other in framing what are students taking away from this curriculum. But could you really drop a learning outcome into a resume or into a cover letter? Usually not. So if you have those learning outcomes, if you can translate those into something that would be useful for a student, that would resonate with an employer, that's what we would, if you start with the learning outcomes, that's fine, but again, that's not where you want to finish. It's got to be something that they can drop on their resume, something they can talk about in their interview, and something that your industry partners will recognize. And tracking the marketable skills goal, we are improving that process, I believe, and I'm going to share some data about that as well. The Career Readiness Handbook. So the Texas Workforce Commission approached us about developing a Career Readiness Handbook because they already have some handbooks in place. They have one that's been updated recently for middle school students. They have one, again, that's been updated recently for high school students. So they asked us if we would create one for college students. And the way this is written, we hope, will appeal to a student of any age, is not targeting traditional age students. It should help anyone coming into higher ed. And it's really just a way to help someone plot their action, their thinking, and their action around getting that better job when they graduate, but starting that when they come on campus. So don't wait to go talk to your career services person. Don't wait to think about an internship. And here are some practical ways that you can think about that through the handbook. So it is a tool that is for students. We didn't print any hard copies, but it is available online, and we hope that you're able to share that with your students. We hope that it works. And if you haven't seen this, please check it out. Also, please make sure your career readiness, or rather your career services professionals on your campus have access to it as well. So, tracking the marketable skills goal. This is for all responses in the Backstage accountability system. So 41%, that's a pretty consistent by sector as well. 41% of you responded that, yes, we have created a process and we have implemented it. We were very pleased to see that number. Thank you for your work. We had a healthy chunk that said, no, we've created the process, but we have not implemented it yet. So that's still, we're still encouraged by that, because I think the heavy lift is, part of the heavy lift is really just identifying that process. But implementing it is going to take a longer amount of time. And since we're supposed to accomplish this goal by next year, we hope that you are well into that implementation stage. But we had a sizable chunk also that said, nope, we haven't done any work, and also some that said, I can't hear you, who didn't respond at all. And we took that as a, no, we haven't started or yet. So, so again, that's kind of a healthy chunk of folks. But what that tells us is that we need to do a better job of helping you. So if you have specific questions or specific ideas of how we can do that, we really would love to hear from you about it. So, for universities, so sorry, I think I hit the thing accidentally. So that's the largest chunk for overall institutions was the no and did not respond. And then for you, again, that 41%, you have yes, that you're well into the process. A sizable chunk of no, and then again, but you all, in terms of implementation, you all, universities, your response was more encouraging actually than the two-year institutions, which actually surprised me. And it surprised me because we always thought that 2 years were really well suited to address this goal because they have advisory boards for many of their programs that they meet with regularly. So we were a little surprised by that. So kudos, I guess is what I'm trying to say. And then 2 years had a very sizable chunk of no, we haven't done it, and I can't hear you kind of response. So, but again, what that signals to us is that we have more work to do here to help you reach this goal. So what's coming? We are now in the process of working on a publication. It's an internship toolkit, and what it will do is provide information for employers, so for your workforce partners. How do you design an internship program from scratch, and how do you design it so that it's aligned with 60 by 30 texts? Or how do you take an existing program and tweak it, if needed, to again align with 60 by 30 texts? So just curious, for you and your divisions personally, how many of you hire interns? I would really encourage you to think about that. And if you have some extra money for whatever reason, I really encourage you to do that, particularly because one of the things in the Career Readiness Handbook that we really kind of stress is to say, don't wait. If you are a junior and you are just starting to think about an internship, you have missed your opportunity. Because a lot of these internships get filled for a summer slot, get filled the summer before. Not all of them, but by January, usually for sure. So you don't want to miss an opportunity, but you may be in a position to really help those students that have tremendous talent, but maybe weren't in a position to invest their thinking about an internship. You know, students have a lot going on, right? So maybe they just didn't get to that internship in terms of their thinking about their career path. But you could help them with that. You know, right now even, you could go back, check out your budget. If you have money, go find an intern for the summer. They would really appreciate it. And think about the skills you guys would be teaching them, because you do really hard work. You do very intricate work, both down to logistics and also very high level, because all your high level work informs your logistics. That's a really unique opportunity, a really unique learning opportunity for students. So please think about it. Something else we are thinking about as we dig through the data that we got through accountability, we're starting to look at the qualitative information that we got, because we asked, you know, where are you in the process, and then what does your process look like? And we're digging into that what does your process look like question now, and we're identifying some common themes, and we're going to turn that into a best practices document or some suggestions for here's what other people are doing, here's a way to think about it for you. So for a lot, I've looked through some of your information for universities and seeing a lot of things like, well, we're taking a look at our SACS guidelines, and whatever we have to do for SACS, we're going to see what we can do to leverage that for marketable skills. I think that's a great idea, because you're not recreating the wheel, you're not doubling your work effort, you're taking something you've already done and leveraging it to accomplish the goal. And I think that's a great idea. And interestingly, looking at the 2-year data, a number of them said they are using their guided pathways work to inform the marketable skills goal. I think some of you may be familiar with that work as you're talking to your transfer partners, your transfer institution partners. So that was really interesting for us to learn, because we never thought of that. Okay, the leadership conference happens every fall, and it is a required training for new boards of regents, and we invite chancellors and presidents to come as well. The first day is always that requisite training, but the second day is usually focused on some theme related to 60 by 30 text, and this year it's going to be marketable skills. So look for that. Hopefully the announcement will come. Usually it comes in the summer. We are also planning another conference for 2020. And I think we are, my hope is that we can actually focus that on a future of work theme, and bring some speakers in to talk to you about maybe some skills. And again, these are not new skills. These are skills you're already teaching, but how do they need to be repackaged to resonate with current employers? Okay, well, that is the end of my piece. I'd love to answer any questions if you have any. Yes? Oh, go right ahead.
Regarding the slide about maintaining 80% of the people working, is that just looking at Texas data? So if our graduates go and work in New York or California, that's not being counted?
That is correct. So what we have access to are the Texas unemployment insurance wage data and placement data, and we only have industry. We don't have occupation. So yes, our data does have limitations. That's why we are putting this as a maintenance goal, because this is where it's been for about 6 or 7 years. We want to see where it changes.
Just for clarity, it'd be good to put that. Add that it's just for people working in Texas as a clear.
That is in the details in the plan.
Oh, it is? Okay,
I did not get into the nuance here on the slide.
And then I have one other question regarding, since the marketable skills are for all students, graduate and undergraduate students, correct? For the graduates, one of the things we've heard from the graduate school is a marketable skill that we think of for our graduate students, for instance, is research. Includes, that one could extrapolate to the NACE to their qualifications to say, well, writing or critical thinking. But they're wondering if we can just say a marketable skill for a graduate student is doing research, especially if they're going into teaching in academia.
Oh, absolutely. That is certainly a marketable skill, and it's
right.
It's
just not listed on any of those other ones per se. So I just want to make sure.
Where are you? So UT Austin has decided to take a systematic or a systemic approach where they're using the NACE competencies. Yep. That's a very narrow list.
Okay.
So that is a decision by your leadership. That is not something that we have suggested you do. So yes, you can absolutely use that, but that is a conversation for your leadership.
Great.
Yeah. So we say it's
The NACE competencies, certainly it is part of the guidelines. It is a place to start. Right, but only as a place to start. It's not saying that's the end. Yeah.
Ginger, thanks for all the information today. On Carolyn's point, have you considered using, many of us do alumni surveys where 1 year later we'll survey our students. Have you considered collecting or allowing us to submit that information to maybe capture those out-of-state employment numbers?
So we, I don't know if we have. I'm going to let someone who knows about data tell you.
Sorry, could you say it one more time? We were having a microphone problem over here when you were asking the question. Could you just ask one more time?
What he was asking is, could they submit their first year, their graduate surveys with the data about placement into workforce?
So what I was going to add is that we are working on some new partnerships to get out-of-state wage information. And so UT and the system have worked with either the Census Bureau or IRS records, and so we are very close to being able to tap into the IRS records to get some out-of-state information. So that's something that we will be really exciting to see the out-of-state, but also there are people that we don't capture in Texas with the unemployment insurance, so people who are self-employed or at companies that are below 25, I think. So that's going to be a very exciting opportunity to expand our understanding of employment and earnings. But what I'll say is I don't know if directly it will affect this measure because the number was set based on the Texas information. So I think we will absolutely have supplementary information and be able to provide that by institution to be able to say, okay, once we add in these other people, you get up to 87% or something like that. Or for folks who I know have a lot of out-of-state, they're in the 50s or something, so it brings them up to 60 or, whatever it's going to be. So I think at this point, what we've talked about for the plan is there are a couple of things like this where over time there's maybe new information or we've adjusted our thinking a little bit that we consider 2020 to be the time where we're going to wait for the 2020 data to come in, and then we'll take a look at sort of our trends. We may adjust target numbers. We may consider a methodology adjustment at that time. So not immediately. So know that there's more information coming. We know that it's a gap in our view, but whether we officially include it and change the methodology formally or just have it as a supplementary piece of information, we will at minimum do that.
That is awesome.
It is exciting, isn't it?
So you hinge directly in, Jason Simon, UNT, into my comment. IRS, National Labor Board, we're agnostic. The one request that if we could make it is if it's possible for you to return detailed level data back to us for our students. So as you negotiate those relationships, if there's a way for us to, if there's going to be FERPA hurdles or there's going to be OGC issues that we need to tackle, let's think about that on the forefront, because I think we're really interested, yes, in the aggregated results, but we're even more interested in the individual student level data, especially when we start getting into slicing it by.
I'm going to tell you that that's going to be a hard no, and that's not us, that's the IRS, that they will not release anything with a 50 cell, lower than 50 cell size. So what we're doing, and Chelsea is thinking hard about this with me, about how do we get the most information out of this partnership. And so, by institution, by sector, by program at the state level, I mean, we'll try and cut it as many ways as we can, but we won't be able to get at individual student.
Sad face.
I know.
Thanks.
But let's mostly feel really excited about this opportunity. It's been, I will tell you, I have worked on this almost the entire time I've been here, I feel like, to try and get this done. So this has been more than a year,
That's like
multiple years yeah. trying to get this done. So we are super close and we're very excited about it. So we'll share details when we have those.
Yeah, so if you could share that report when you actually have it slicing and dicing capability, that'll be great. Yeah. I understand not able to share the raw data, but
yeah, we won't even get the student data. So.
That's fine.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. Yep, happy to share.
Any other questions on marketable skills? Okay, great. Well, have a terrific meeting, rest of your meeting.
Thanks, Ginger. I was just going to, is there one more question over there?
No.
No, okay. I was just going to add a couple of things as you were talking. It reminded me that we actually asked 3 questions this year for Marketable Skills. We asked the data that Ginger showed about having a process and implementing it. We asked you to describe that process. And then we also asked for the number of programs that you have and the number of programs for which you've already identified the marketable skills. So we asked that question last year, didn't get the best response, so we're sort of sorting through it because what is a program is sort of being interpreted differently. And so we will be showing that. I want folks to know that right now we're kind of showing this information in the aggregate, but we will be showing it in the accountability system at the institutional level. This year we're just going to show the do you have a process, what your response was to that. By next year we'll also show that percent, how many programs you have, how many have their identified marketable skills. And then, I don't know that we'll show the process ever, but we may start using it as exemplars. So as we review, we may pull quotes and examples and things like that. So I want you to know that we're kind of phasing in the publicness of the responses over the next couple of years as we get closer. And we did have a question about when exactly the 2020 deadline hits. And so we will be talking about the 2020 data in the spring of 2021, right? So what we want is for you to be able to tell us you're kind of hitting that 2020 benchmark year will be in the fall of 2020. You'll tell us where you are, and that will close out the 2020 data year. So some people asked a good question about, hey, does that actually mean it's the fall of 19? Because the fall of 19 is in the 2020 academic fiscal year, right? So no, don't panic. It's not. It's going to be the 2020 fall. Okay? All right. Okay, so the next thing is, I think Ginger had the right idea. Don't stand behind the column. Stand over here so you can see things. Okay, so the next little piece is just some nuts and bolts updates on the accountability system. So I hope that you're one of the lucky people that goes into the accountability system on a regular basis because it's good for you. So there are some new features that we have that we've worked on over the last year. As I said, this is kind of the 3rd year that we're into the system, and so now we're kind of not jackhammering but sandpapering. So I hope that you'll see some of these improvements and appreciate them. So these are, I'll talk through each of these here. So the first is some folks who are the lucky individuals on your campuses that log in and do some of the manual entry data input part. We call it our institutional portal. So if folks come into the institutional portal, they add some data. They can provide comments to say, oh, hey, we had a particularly good year this year, or oh, hey, we had a not so good year, but we had a hurricane or whatever happened you want to talk about. You can add that contextual information in there, but folks wanted to see the full preview before it goes live, and so this is now a possibility. So if you put that information in under report review and you go down to create PDF, you can print that out, share that with your leadership, get full sign off before it will go live. So you can find that there. Some folks have wanted to be able to print their fully produced data. So once the accountability system goes live after the first of the year, they wanted to be able to look at all of their measures in one foul swoop. And so you can create a PDF to do this. There are, unfortunately, 2 options. Neither is perfect, and you can decide which of the cons you prefer. So if you're just in the regular accountability system, say you go to the homepage, you've picked universities here, you go to Angelo State and see where the red box is there. It says create complete report. You can click that button and it will give you what we call kind of monster print, full download of all of your measures. The good news is that is 2018 data. The bad news is that the PDF, it is just a raw data pull. So some of the tables split across pages. It's not formatted properly. You can follow along, but you might want to scotch tape your pages together, okay? So not ideal. The other way to do it is that we actually have to go in through a manual process to make sure that that formatting all happens properly. And you can find those under, if you go in the interactive, that top right-hand button. Interactive is where you can get all of the data for download. And you can see the top button, download data, is kind of fully customizable, lots of choices, lots of filtering. Predefined reports I'll talk about in a minute. But at the bottom, accountability reports, that's your full report. You can go there, and it's all formatted, and it's nice, but it's only updated to 2017, because we are still working on it, because we have to get a consultant to come in and do this. So very soon, you should be able to have a pretty version and the current data, which is ideal. And that's what a pretty version looks like. Okay. Predefined reports. We have people who are on the far end of the data wonk scale, myself included, and those people want full download data. They want to see all the tables that are available. They want 7 filters, and they get fully customized spreadsheets, and they want to do lots of their own analysis. There are lots of people who do not want so many options. They want it to be kind of, here is a nice presentation of the data that I'm probably looking for, so just help me get there. So predefined reports are exactly that. So some of the most common things that people want to look at, for instance, graduation rates. So you want to compare your graduation rate to others in the state. You want a quick, handy way to do that. Go to these predefined reports. You could click on graduation rates. And you can see, this is for statewide, you can see the universities, you can see the community and technical colleges for different years. And one of the kind of glitchy things we had early on is that we were just providing counts, the number of students who graduated out of the number of students who were in the cohort. But people said nobody thinks about graduation rates that way. We want to see a percent. So now that's kind of easy to find here, and it's by every institution. So check that out. Also, the out-of-state peer comparisons, that this was something that was in the old accountability system, but we did not have the capacity to fully implement until this year. So now you can find, if you have given us your out-of-state peers, the out-of-state peer information is pulled and provided there. So it's, I think, at the bottom of the page on each of the pages. So you may know that all the measures are organized around the goals and the 4 goals of the plan, plus a sector-specific section. And so if you scroll down, you'll see that where there are comparisons to your out-of-state peers, they're published there now. Last one here is the system is sometimes slow. It is pulling data live. These are basically, they're not kind of prefab cut tables that are pasted in here. So it's pulling the data actively, and so it sometimes takes a few seconds, and now you know with these little dots that are sort of drumming that you have not crashed the system, it's just thinking hard. Okay. And the last piece on this isn't explicitly about the accountability system nuts and bolts, but it is last summer, internally, the Strategic Planning and Funding Division decided to do a strategic planning of our own process work, so not kind of the big state level stuff, but just kind of our day-to-day work. And we discovered kind of across our 36-person division that one of the key pain points was on timeliness of data submission. And so essentially all of the data come in, and then we hit the accountability system, we're doing our formula funding runs, we're doing the almanac, et cetera. So all these things flow from the same data, and they run in sequence. So when the data come in late, it means none of that stuff can go forward. If we even have a single institution that's late, we can't run our statewide numbers. So we decided to make a big push around encouraging and supporting more timely data submission. And so we put a big goal out there for ourselves, which is that 100% of our fall coordinating board, our CBM data, would be certified by institutions within 4 weeks. And it would be in shape that we could use it within 6 weeks. We could start our analysis. So that puts us at December 1st. So just to give you some perspective, what we did is really, we've done a lot of messaging around this. We've enhanced sort of the late notifications that we're sending out. We're doing it. We're starting that process earlier, so we don't wait till it's kind of a disaster. So by December 1 last year, for the fall 17 data, we only had 84% of our data available that we could start our analysis with. But this fall, we were up to 94%. So that was a big increase. And I just want to say thank you to everybody for your support on that, because it really makes a big difference. And you can see there at the bottom, it allowed us to publish published the accountability system almost a month earlier this year. So it really does have a big impact on our work, and especially in a legislative year, it makes a big difference to be able to get those formula runs going and also to share this accountability information with legislators. So thank you, keep up the good work. We're aiming for 100%. So you can see on the site if you're curious about your own reporting, we publish when each institution certified their data. And we have a few things that are still on the enhancement list. I'll start at the bottom. Speed, we know that it sometimes is kind of slow, so that's something that we've hired a contractor to help us with, help accelerate that a little bit. We also know that people run into issues where when you come into the system, you have to pick a sector first, then you go into a goal, and then you go into a measure. But let's say then you want to switch. Sometimes it kicks you all the way back to the beginning, which is annoying. So we're doing this, trying to move to more of a no wrong door, that you can come in through the sector buttons or you can come in through the goal buttons, and you will still be able to get to the same information. So that's something we're also working on. We're going to continue to add interactive tables for data download. We're also adding FICE as one of the filters. Some people want to be able to sort and merge on different items, and it's easy to do with our FICE codes. And then, as I mentioned, those well-formatted 2018 full accountability reports will be done shortly. So those are coming. All right. Pause there before we switch. Yes. Dr. Eklund.
Trivia question. I actually asked several people this yesterday, and we didn't get a definitive answer. And External Relations said, yes, if we want to interrupt the meeting, please ask again. We got a question from downtown, and we just have no idea what the answer is, and we thought maybe somebody here could help us. So here's the question, which at least they recognized was a weird question. Okay, there are 2 public universities in Texas that have partnerships with ISDs and run a boarding school on their campus. One is in the Valley, and the one is in East Texas, but I can't remember which universities they are. Do you know anything about this? Well, I started asking, and nobody really could figure this out. Does anybody have any idea? We don't think it's Tim's. Yes? You do? That's wonderful. Okay, and you have, what is the school? Maybe I'll just catch you for more detail so we can send this back downtown. For those of, is anyone interested in hearing about this? Oh, Susan says yes. Okay, what are you doing?
On the edge of our seat.
I know, this is exciting, because yesterday I went to one of the East Texas groups. I guess I went to the wrong one.
Yeah, okay. Well, what we have is we have a charter school on campus that, is a complete school from K through 5th grade. It goes up to middle school. Actually, no, I take that back. It's been expanded through middle school. It goes up to high school now.
Okay.
And it used to be run by the district in Nacogdoches, but we took it over. We run it ourselves. Education is our largest college, and so elementary ed is a major program for us.
But they're a boarding school, so the students actually live there.
Well, no. They don't live on the campus.
Okay, because the question was a boarding school, but maybe this is still what they mean. So. Yeah.
Well, when you said East Texas, that's why I responded. But the students don't live on campus. No.
Okay, and it's no longer in partnership with an ISD. It used to be.
No, we run it ourselves.
Okay,
completely.
But at some point, did they live on campus or?
No.
Okay.
Not that I know of.
Well, that's a start. Anyone else know anything about boarding schools on a campus? Good. Well, that was very helpful. Thank you. And I have one other question. When you're in accountability and you see those little knuckles going, do you go along with it? I have been known to do that, so I have to tell you, I'm really excited. Yes, I drum. I drum. It's like, okay, let's go. So we're excited that I think we're going to get some resources to try to speed things up. So, okay. Thank you for working with me on that. I'm going to hand it back to Jenna.
All right. So just to finish out that, any other questions or comments on the accountability system or challenges or concerns that you have? Yeah. Out-of-state peer comparisons. Maybe email Chelsea about that. Is that all right? So you can easily, my information is in the PowerPoint, so if you want to email me, that's fine, or Chelsea Moore, I think it's just chelsea.moore@thacb.state.tx.us. And luckily, Moore is easier than Cullinane Heggie to spell. Okay, so it'll go into effect for next year. We wouldn't do an immediate mid-year update, but we can pick you up for next year.
And we did just, everyone, you can send us about your individual peers, but of course there's those group peers that everyone decided on together, and we worked on updating those a few years ago. Oh, thanks. We worked on updating those group peers a few years ago. Are people still feeling like those are appropriate? Where that each of the, you're not thinking so, Jason? Anybody else feel like we need to have you look at group peers? Because that's something we could set up for next year at this meeting, if you feel like maybe those peers that you decided on with your peer group are not going to work. Your individual ones, of course, we're happy to make a change for the next cycle. But why don't we have a show of hands? How many of you would like to talk about this when you get together next year, the group peers that you select? Because I'm kind of trying to look at you by region. So it looks like we definitely have folks over in the emerging research that want to look at those, and and you guys are in the comprehensive back there? And the masters. Okay, so the masters and the emerging research would like to take another look at those. So we can schedule that for when we have you back together next year, but be thinking about it. And I would be open to, if you could get everybody on board with a change amongst yourselves, I would be open to doing something that way as well, if you all agree to making a change that way. But otherwise, we could have people come and discuss it at the next accountability meeting. Okay.
Yeah, the HRIs actually brought this up too, so that would make sense. We can definitely take this up next year. All right. All right, moving right along. Is everyone stretch, grab a drink if you need to. We're going to keep right on moving. So the next piece is kind of the background to support the top improver analysis. So we identified last year, we really focused on a variety of completion measures and decided to do these comparisons by peer group and by region. And we'll talk a little bit more about the methodology in a bit. But this year, we thought, let's stay focused on completion outcomes. And we also looked at graduation rates as kind of a key feeder into ultimately how many completers you have. Although it's not specifically a goal or target in the plan, it obviously helps inform what kind of the throughput rate is moving to our completions. But this year, the piece that we added was we wanted to add, both in the 2-year sector and in the 4-year sector, we wanted to add an element focused on transfer. If you've been paying attention to the legislature, there is lots and lots of energy and attention around transfer. The coordinating board has been focused in a big way on fields of study, and I'll share some information about that soon. So we felt like this is part of the completion pipeline, and so wanted to add one element. So for our community and technical colleges, we included field of study completion as a key metric, and for you all, we included the transfer graduation rate as an item to kind of keep that as part of the completion, on your completion radar as part of this process. So to kind of ease into this discussion, what I wanted to do here is, so far we've been looking at changes in a short period of time between 2016 and 2018. That's kind of what's currently available in the accountability system. But wanted to give a little bit of a longer range look at some of these items. So here I'm showing completions. And what you can see is, over the long haul, when we look back to 2000, very significant increases in the state in terms of improving completions. And just since 2015, about 34,000 more students each year are earning a credential. And when we look at graduation rates, I think this is even more stunning. So on the left, these are the public university graduation rates going back to 2000. And you can see in 2000, if you look at that red line, that's the 4-year graduation rate. So our on-time graduation rate was less than 20%. And now we're up to 38.6%. So, I mean, nearly doubling over this period of time. And that is very impressive to me. If you look at the 5-year rate, if you look at the blue line, you can see that almost 20 years ago, we were at 41%. We're now up to 57%. At the 6-year rate, in 2000, we were a little under 50% and now up to 61.6%. And, you know, I even see in the last 3 years in particular, if you look at that red line is really ticking up. So I hear it in the conversation. I know people are focused on timely graduation, and we're really starting to see it aggregate up at the state level. And so, number one, want to applaud that effort and say that we're on a really good trajectory and really well positioned to kind of keep moving the needle on this. I do want to show the community colleges too, because when you come here, I think it's important to kind of think of the state at large and not just your individual institution. And so want to point out, obviously, the graduation rates are much lower, but overall, you can see that there's also kind of this doubling. If you look at their on time, the red line for them, they went from 10% graduating on time to 22.8%. So, you know, across the board as a state, we're really seeing dramatic improvements. And again, the last 3 years for them, you see this kind of nice uptick for them as well. And we know that completions are increasing across the board, that, you know, more Hispanic students are completing, more African American students are completing, but the theme here is kind of not quickly enough to kind of keep pace with where our population is headed. And so the benchmarks and the targets for these populations were set looking at getting closer to an equitable distribution based on our population and representation in the state. We have looked at changes in the Texas population, kind of to that point. And so we have relied on for the last couple of years on a little bit older population projections, but these are brand new ones that the Texas Demographic Center put out in December. And so what you can see here is probably not a surprise to anybody in the room, but when you look at the blue bars for African Americans or the black bar for Hispanic population, you see significant growth among African Americans and then really large growth among the Hispanic population in almost all age groups. And the white population, the big change from the previous projections to now is that if you looked at this 6 months ago, it would have shown mostly decreases among the white population. Now you can see the decrease is in the 35 to 64-year-old, the oldest age group, a decrease, and it's a teeny tiny decrease for the 18 to 24-year-olds, but previously it was negative for kind of all the categories. So what's happening is that there's actually a fair amount of in-migration, so kind of the projected white decrease has slowed and is kind of a modest increase in some of these categories. And at the same time, the Hispanic birth rate has slowed. So Hispanic population is continuing to grow, but it's slightly lower than what was projected a few years ago. So those are some of the shifts that we're seeing kind of at a broad state level as we look forward to 2030. And we also know that an increasing number of students are using the transfer pathway as they move to completion. And this is some data that we show, not in accountability, but in our annual almanac. And you can see that overall, in the total, we have about a little less than a quarter of students who start at two-year institutions transfer. And that there's some pretty wide variation in outcomes by our different student populations by race and ethnicity. So about 27% of white students are transferring compared to about 16% of African American students, compared to 42% of our Asian American students. So some important differences to consider there. And I know we talked about this. One of the ways that we see an indication of issues is when we look at these semester credit hour differences across Native students and transfer students. We showed earlier the 6 and the 12 when we look at our bachelor's, 6 and the 23. When we look at bachelor's completers. And these are attempted hours, so there are, and just a reminder, we don't count dual credit courses against you in this excess hours. We start the clock kind of after first time in college status. So these are other patterns of mobility outside of dual credit courses that we're seeing here. Yeah. Mm-hmm. The numbers at the bottom are, so the numbers at the bottom tell you how large that population is as a proportion of all of the students. So let's just take white for a second. So 27% of them transfer, and white students make up 41% of the population. So when you look at the Asian, for instance, they've got really high transfer rate, but they only make up 6% of the transfer population. Yeah, that was new. Good eagle eye, Susan. Okay, so one of the ways the coordinating board has been working on partnership with the legislature and partnership with faculty groups, trying to make transfer pathways more seamless is the development of these fields of study curricula. And I know some of this came up in the discussions yesterday, depending on your region, heard more and less of it. So essentially what these fields of study are, and I think it's fair to say, I heard a couple of times yesterday, these haven't been on our radar, they haven't been a major priority, but I'm telling you now, the coordinating board is really moving for this to be a significant priority. And I will acknowledge that these have been on the books for a long time, over a decade. And there was a requirement to do about 10 fields, and to me it looks like kind of 10 random fields were selected. They were not necessarily high enrollment, and they haven't gotten a lot of love. They got on a website and then they've gotten dusty. So it's kind of a new day for this. And so it's not surprising that this has not been a high priority for a lot of folks, but 2 years ago, the legislature gave us some money and gave us a directive to move on the top 25 highest enrollment majors. So this is a much more systematic effort and focused effort that's going on now than what has been happening over the last decade. So the good news for transfer students is that when these fields of study get determined by faculty groups, we identify kind of the lower division major specific courses. For each of these, we're very, very close to hitting the top 25. We have 30 done in total and just a couple shy of the top 25 highest enrollment majors. Those should be done in the next 1 or 2 quarters. And so when student completes these, either in whole or in part, it's not only guaranteed to transfer, but guaranteed to apply to that particular field. And there is often confusion about the kind of in whole or in part piece, but the statute is pretty clear on that point. And the way these are actually happening in practice really varies based on the field. I think people thought field of study was kind of one thing, but it actually really depends on the discipline, not surprisingly, that some of these are sort of small and some of them are larger. And so you've got ones like communications, which are 12 hours or so, and you've got things like architecture that are 36 hours, for example. So the way these work actually in practice is that, it's kind of in concept, core plus field of study will get you most of the way to a degree or in a good position to kind of maximize your transfer hours in terms of applicability. But often there's some overlap. A lot of these fields of study include a couple of core courses as well. So what this visual is trying to do is just show kind of on the small side, you often have maybe some other courses if you're going to get to the full associate degree before you transfer. For the larger ones, there's often a high degree of overlap with the core. And the idea is not that you would have a 42-hour core plus another 36 hours. No, it's a blending. So so that's the concept. So what you will see that while we had a pretty good increase in terms of a 72% increase in the number of field of study completions that we saw this year, these numbers are small. And these numbers are below where we want to be. And the idea is that in the next 1 to 2 years that we're really putting a concerted push on this. Some of this is under-reporting simply because there has been no incentive for people to report on this. The community colleges report to us the completions, you all don't. But we can see who has them when they get to your institutions. So we've been talking a lot about with reporting officials to make sure this is done. So partially we have reporting problems, and partially we are providing a lot more support in terms of implementation and how to do this. So as I said, as we get the top 25 are very close to being done, and they've been approved in the last 1 to 2 years. So it takes some implementation time before they have time to go into effect. Plus, you have to get students actually through them and complete them. So we know that there's kind of a little bit of a lag here, and as we'll keep moving. But do just want to provide a little bit of information here about it's criminal justice and business are the two that we're seeing kind of the most uptick in. So we'll continue to track this and provide information kind of at the disciplinary level so you can see how these are being utilized. Okay. So now, this is the most fun part, where we're going to talk about how we've used that completion information, that graduation rate information, and now for you guys, the transfer graduation rate piece, to identify institutions who have made kind of big progress in the last couple of years. So I'm going to hand it off to Luis, who actually conducted this analysis for us, and he'll talk about it.
Thank you, Jenna. Appreciate that. Okay. So before we get to the big review of the matrices of who's high and who's high medium, I want to give you some background on how we got there and why we're doing this. So first, why are we doing this? The first reason is that because this is data that you can get right now through our accountability system, through the interactive data portal. And we want to show you just one use of how you can use it to drive improvement, either through your region, your institution, your peer group. And then we've identified some of these institutions who are in the high, medium categories to come and share their best practices, and we're going to give them some time shortly in a few minutes as a forum where they're going to share with you a couple of slides of what they think is driving some of the high improvements in some of these completion and graduation rate categories. Okay? So what we are focusing on this year are three areas. Here you can see we're focusing on completions, number one. That's overall completions. Then the second thing we're focusing on is the associated completions. So those are the target populations like African American, Hispanic, male, and economically disadvantaged. And the third area that we're focusing on is transfer. So you'll see the graduation rates there. You'll see the 4-year, the 6-year, and then the transfer rates. Okay? So once we have that data there, what we're going to do is we conducted a top improver analysis, and we did it by 2 dimensions. The first dimension was by peer group, so the peer groups that you're sitting in right now, and the second dimension was by region. So you can see a map of the region here, from High Plains all the way to South Texas. And then the other thing that we did is that for the smaller regions, we combined you just to have some symmetry there. So you can see some of the regions that were combined include West Texas and Upper Rio Grande, Southeast and Upper East were combined, and then High Plains and Northwest were combined as one, so we can conduct the analysis. Okay? So now quantitatively, what we looked at, the time period is 2016 to 2018, so that 3-year time period. And the way that we analyzed completions was by percentage change. The way that we analyzed graduation rates was by percentage point change. And then we had a rating system of low, medium, and high. So to conduct that, we used percentiles. If you were at the low, that meant that you were at the 50th percentile or lower. If you were at the medium, that meant that you were at the 51st to 89th percentile. And if you were in the high category, you were greater than or equal to the 90th percentile. Okay, so we have 3 different kinds of percentiles to do that. And so now all that background being said, here's the big reveal. We have a question? Yeah.
So the graduation rate you're talking about is graduated same or other, right?
It's total. Total. Okay. All right. So the first matrix that we're going to look at is overall completions, and here it is. So the matrices are all going to be set up the same. On the y-axis, you're going to see peer group. You're going to see low, medium, and high. And on the x-axis, you're going to see the region, low, medium, and high. And so if you're in the upper right quadrant, that means that you're high for your region and high for your peer group. Okay, so you can see institutions such as the University of Texas at Tyler and West Texas A&M University are in the high for overall completions. Okay, and then if you're in high for region and medium for peer group, you would be in that quadrant right below that. Okay, so I'll give you just a couple of seconds to soak that in, and then we'll move on to our next one. What we'll see next are the completions, and we'll start with African American. Again, the matrix is set up the same way, and For this one, just as a reminder, for the completions, we use a percentage change method to analyze the data, okay? So there you see in the high category, University of Texas at Tyler, Texas State University in this category. Okay. Then moving on to the Hispanic completions, again, you see the same setup, and you see Texas Tech University and the University of Texas at Tyler in the high category, and you see the other institutions in either the high-medium or medium-high, depending on region or peer group. Oh, yes, sorry. There's a line here. So UNT Dallas and Texas A&M University are also high. It might just be the screen. I can see a little line. Okay. The next category is male completion. And here we see in the high category, the University of Texas at Tyler, Texas A&M Corpus Christi, the University of North Texas at Dallas, and Texas Tech University. Okay. And as I mentioned, some of these institutions are going to get up here and share some of their best practices. Okay. Now we look at economically disadvantaged. And for this category, in the high, we have the University of Texas at Tyler, the University of Texas at Permian Basin, Texas A&M University, the University of Texas at Dallas. Okay? And so that's for completions. Now moving on to grad rates. We will first look at the 4-year grad rate. And in the high category, here, in high for this category, we have the University of Texas at Austin, University of North Texas at Dallas, Texas A&M University Texarkana, and Texas A&M University Corpus Christi. Okay. So then we'll move on to the 6-year grad rate. And in this category for high, we have the University of Texas at Austin, University of Houston downtown, Texas A&M University Kingsville. Okay. And the last category that we have is top improvement for transfer grad rates. And in this category for high, we have Sul Ross State University Rio Grande College, the University of Texas at Austin, Texas Women's University, and Midwestern State University. Okay? Now, one thing that when we showed these last year, all the institutions were saying, well, can you show me where I fall into this matrix? And so what we've done, what we're going to do in order to have you see where you fall into these matrices is we're going to have a webinar next Thursday, April 11th at 10 a.m. and we'll send out an email with all the details so you can join us, and I'll show you how you can go from downloading the raw data on the interactive portal to actually creating these matrices for your peer group, for your region, for your institution. Okay? And so with that being said, I'll turn back over to Jenna.
All right, thanks. So we wanted to do this in a way to really highlight top improvers. You know, my vision is not that we point out low, but what we want to do with the webinar is you have the capacity. This is all in interactive. You could go look right now what your percent changes are and then just order them up however you want. So that was kind of a nice blend of making sure that we're showing and highlighting top improvers and selecting some to hear about what's actually behind the data. So what is making a difference? And in a lot of cases, it's maybe not just one thing. It's probably several things. And so I look forward to hearing about that. In terms of who was invited to present, I want to make sure that you're not ruffling feathers here. So just calm your feathers just for a minute. And the way that these were selected is a combination of art and science, okay? So we're looking at people who were top improvers in multiple categories. We picked them out, but we also wanted to make sure we had good regional representation and we had good peer group representation. So we wanted to make sure that there's a comprehensive highlighted and there's a research and there's an emerging research. So it's a blend. So this is not to say these are the very best that we're hearing from, but it's kind of a mix of ones that had multiple indicators that they were doing some top improvement. So that's what we're going to hear from next. And so the first group, we're going to have several folks who had high completion outcomes. So we're going to do one panel for graduation rates and one panel for completions because they're similar, complementary, but not exactly the same. You could do one without the other, right? So in the first group, we're going to hear from UT Tyler, Texas A&M University, who had a last-minute cancellation, so we're going to have the distinguished Elizabeth Shivers filling in on a couple of notes there, Texas Tech University, and UT Permian Basin. So first, we're going to have Sarah Bowden at UT Tyler, and just wanted to call out the areas where they were top improvers. So their overall completions increased 25%. Their African-American completions increased 41% over this period. Hispanic completion up 60%. Economically disadvantaged up 30%. Male completion up 23%. And their transfer graduation rate also went up 8 percentage points. So they were the one that had the most this year, the most areas of top improvement. So please join me in congratulating and welcoming Sarah to come down and share a little bit about what's going on at UT Tyler.
Thank you. Thank you for the opportunity to present. We're very happy with our results. Well, I'll just tell you where we are as an institution. We're in Upper East Texas. Do I have a clicker? Okay. Probably all know. We're one of 14 campuses in the UT system. We are a master's institution. We were recently reclassified as a doctoral professional university, offer more than 80 degree programs, and we have courses offered in Tyler, Longview, Palestine, Houston, with just over 10,000 in enrollment. I'm going to focus on a couple of transfer initiatives, but we've also partnered with our local community. I'll just throw this in there. It's not on the PowerPoint. We have a Tyler Area Partnership for Education. It's a partnership between the ISDs in our area, the community colleges, another four-year institution, and ourselves, where we have outreach for financial aid and application drives. We work collaboratively to share data, and we have certain initiatives and methods that we use as that partnership. The two things I'm highlighting are not really unique. I mean, a lot of institutions have partnerships on other campuses. The BAAS degree is not new to us either. I'll just highlight the changes that we've made to kind of tweak these programs in order to see these results. Starting with the Houston Engineering Center, this is where probably most of our diversity and accomplishments are seen, because that center in Houston has 81% male, 72% non-white, and 33% Hispanic. We created this partnership with the Houston Community College. We're on the A-Leaf Hayes campus in Houston, and we have partnered, though, with several of the local community colleges in Houston to accept the ACES degree in its entirety into our engineering program. So if they complete the Associate Science in Engineering Science, we will accept that as a total group of courses that go into the four-year degree. So it's a seamless transfer. The need for this was found to be because many students were not able to complete this degree in that area, and so the community colleges reached out to us, and we have created these partnerships, and it's grown to just, I think, 416 students are enrolled there now. We have well-equipped labs. UT Tyler faculty are on the campus there. We have library resources, supplemental instruction, tutoring, and all of the things that they would have in Tyler, we have resources there in Houston. The second program that I'll talk about is our BAAS degree, which we've had, like I said, for quite a long time, but we did redesign the program in 4 ways to meet the needs of the students. First, we redesigned the curriculum so that we would accept more hours at the upper division level. We created a professional core of coursework that teaches 21st century workforce skills that our local businesses deemed most important. So we worked with the local community leaders and business leaders to see what was the need of our region. We have a lot of students that complete associate degrees in East Texas, but they weren't able to move, advance in their careers without the bachelor's degree. And so we worked with them on the curriculum. We created thematic concentrations in business occupations, healthcare management, health studies, human behavior, and general studies so that it would kind of spotlight the differences in the general BAAS degree and what those thematic concentrations they had were. And we moved it to an online 7-week session. To support these, we've also looked at the different pillars for completion and retention, and under the finances area, we have had several FAFSA outreach partnerships with Houston to encourage completion. We've offered financial aid counseling to students entering with over 100 hours, which we do that with all students anyway, but we're able to flag them if they're entering specifically with the BAAS degree. There are a lot of hours involved there, and how that affects their financial aid, they need to know up front, so we've been proactive in that. We've also partnered with Student Money Management to launch an online tool for financial wellness. Under advising, we've decentralized and added professional advisors, expanded the face-to-face virtual tutoring, and implemented the graduation help desk with the resources from UT system. Under Belonging, we've collaborated with the Tyler Ayer Partnership for Education, like I said earlier, and we have implemented 10 student organizations on the Houston campus to offer students the opportunity to get valuable knowledge in teamwork and leadership. And this was all instituted by the students there that wanted those opportunities for collaboration. Thank you. Do you have any questions?
At the end. All right. Thank you so much. Congratulations. All right. Next up is Texas A&M. I know that David Martin is on available remotely, but sent some notes. So Elizabeth, do you want to come and share? And there are slides. Yeah.
Okay, so as you can see, Texas A&M University is up in completions overall with a plus 14% for this year. African American completion is up 30%, Hispanic completion 30%, economically disadvantaged completion 12%, and male completion is up 14%. So they did share a little information with us to kind of help provide some context for what they've been doing that have supported these increases. Okay, so first of all, they attribute a lot of this to their focus on these student success goals, and this has really been informing what they have been doing on their campus. It's been driving their recent efforts. So in particular, they have a focus on increasing first-year retention, which ultimately will increase completion as well. You can see they have a focus on increasing 4-year graduation rates and 6-year graduation rates. And then you can also see that they have this focus on closing the achievement gaps by ethnicity, first-generation status, gender, and socioeconomic class. This obviously links right back to those increases we were just talking about with completion. You can see those groups reflected there. And then this just overall is focused on bolstering completion as a whole. So some of the things that they've been doing to support this, which this is not very legible on here. I apologize, this is very tiny print. But basically, they've been doing a lot of different things, both new and old initiatives that support students throughout their process. And so basically, they highlighted things within all of their categories, including academic preparedness, student engagement, academic advising, even I can't read this, hold on, I gotta get closer. bottlenecks for completion, entry-level courses, and financial courses. So a couple of things that we want to highlight, like amongst all of this, is that with academic preparedness, they've made intentional efforts, particularly with math, by giving all students assessments and making sure that they are prepared for their entry-level math courses. They've been focused on student engagement with their long-established incoming student programs, which they continue to look at improving to ensure that their students feel engaged on their campus. And then they also have been looking at entry-level courses. So a recent project that they did was to redesign redesign lower-level math and science courses to increase successful completion rates. So, and when you look at their category for the areas where they're trying to look for bottlenecks, they really want to identify those and what the root causes are to help improve them. And you can see a lot of these things are really focused on things like course redesign, focusing on pedagogy, focusing on course availability, to just kind of ensure that students can get on that path and stay there for that completion. So let's see. And really, they really wanted to highlight that all of this is being brought back together with an Office of Student Success, so that they're making sure they stay focused on those goals to help those students through to completion. And that's what I got.
Thank you for filling in last minute. And congratulations to A&M. Okay. Next, we have Texas Tech, Dr. Patrick Hughes, Vice Provost. So he'll come up and join us. They had top improvement in their African American completers at 26%. Their Hispanic completions were up 38%, economically disadvantaged up 13%, and male completions 17%. So congratulations and thank you.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. Oh, is this it? Okay, thank you for having us down to present on some of what we're able to do. And like other presenters have already said, I don't think that we're doing anything all of you aren't doing. I think that we're all sort of working on the same goals to improve outreach and improve the technical aspects that help improve outreach on campus and to our students. We are seeing some success overall with our African American students, our Hispanic students, as well as other ethnicities over time. To look at the last histogram on the far right would suggest we're doing even better than anyone expected, but that's just our fall to spring rate, while the other histograms represent a fall to fall rate, so not to mislead you. But we anticipate being up, around 0.5% to 1% by this fall. So we're encouraged by what we're seeing. But what do we think we're doing that seems to be helping these rates as well as the other rates of our students? What we're really trying to do for all of our students that is also uplifting our tide in reaching certain specific cohorts. Well, we've redesigned our first-year seminar. We now call it Rater Ready, which is designed around developmental pedagogy, learning techniques, note-taking, professional skills, and goal setting, and we do this in small classes. We have our best faculty who really are interested and have an awareness and a general consciousness on the importance of student success teaching these courses. Our enrollment in this course, which is an 8-week course typically offered in the fall, grows every year. Our faculty interest in teaching it grows every year. And I think that's probably even an indirect indicator of our campus's consciousness and interest in seeing student success and retention improve. Overall, students of all cohorts who participate in our first-year seminar and our Rater Ready tend to do better fall to fall than those who don't. Right now it's voluntary. Resources are a bit constrained to make this something that all students could participate in, but we think we're moving along with this particular form of outreach. Something else that we think that we're doing, like all of you are doing, we're very much interested in doing what we can to improve both the high-tech and the high-touch interventions for our campus and to our students. And one of the and I think we really believe that technology is helping us move along. and that and the results really matter, but we also believe that people matter most. And we think that if we're privileging one side of the high-touch, high-tech continuum, we're trying to privilege the high-touch part of the continuum and making sure that we coordinate our communication to our students across all of the service areas within the undergraduate serving colleges as well as centrally on campus. And that tool that we use to do that we call strive.ttu.edu. And this is our front porch window into our student success technology, and we are currently an EAB Navigate campus. But we don't call it EAB on campus, we call it Strive. And this is the tool that all of our undergraduate serving colleges and what we use centrally to coordinate our communication with our students. And just since last fall, we've been using the system for about 5 years now, but just this last fall, we see academic support programs working in the documentation and the interaction of students. We have our coaching and counseling documentation. We have college advising usage. We have experiential program usage, instructor office hours usage, and our Marcia Sharp Center, which is our center for student-athlete student success, is also using it, as well as our preparation programs and tutoring. So we have a high degree of usage in our strive.ttu.edu system, and we think this coordination of communication between all of those who provide our student services around the same student is certainly helpful to keep our messages consistent to students. We also have peer success coaches, and our peer success coaches respond to and disseminate alerts. We've had since we've been doing this, and we've only been doing the alert part of our intervention strategies for about a year, we've had 2,815 alerts reported by 464 faculty for 1,500 or so distinct students. This continues to increase with each semester, and it really tends to peak around midterms and towards finals, as you can imagine. They work to contact students to help resolve holds and re-enrollment, and we feel this is particularly helpful during our re-enrollment campaign, which is about to start, when we contact every student about registering for courses for the upcoming semester. And during these calls that these peer success coaches make, these coaches work to resolve all of the holds and all of the boundaries or obstacles toward registration that the students might be running into. Additionally, we also use our peer success coaches, who are undergraduate students, to deliver group presentations and provide individual guidance via phone calls and emails, and as well as in person. The peer success coaches are a fixture in our first-year seminar course. And as all of you, we have tutoring services, but one of the things that we've done this year is we're now open 6 days a week in our tutoring center, and we're thinking about going to 7 days a week. We're already getting some positive feedback from students who feel that they're on campus doing things on the weekend and would really like to have access to services such as these. This is this is no small fiduciary commitment, so we're working on this gradually, and I'm not saying that we're open 8 to 5, but we are open a few hours on Saturdays, and hopefully we can expand the hours of operation as well as expand into Sunday. And that also introduces staffing and other challenges, but we think it's having an effect. We also, and as I mentioned before, our coordinated direct communication with students, which is through our strive.ttu.edu system. And the themes that tend to dominate our communication with students deal with enrollment and enrollment preparation and schedule development and degree audit for matriculation purposes, as well as being ready for the upcoming semesters. Evaluating holds, working with any paperwork needs, and doing a lot of positive reinforcement about how successful they've been doing thus far. So you might suspect that our academic advisors are really busy during preparation for early registration and registration period at your campuses. Our peer success coaches and our academic success coaches help to expand that conversation with the students to not just make sure that they're ready for registration, but also that they're feeling congratulated and they're feeling supported in their goals for the upcoming semesters and so on. We've had 159, almost 160,000 total recorded communications across all campus partners using our strive.ttu.edu system, 127 or so thousand emails, and a lot of text messages. So again, we're privileging the high touch aspect, making sure that the technology can support us in our messages to our students. And we still don't have 100% uptake across all of our undergraduate serving colleges on campus. So we're close, but we're not there yet, and we suspect that once we are, we'll see improvement in our metrics as well as our overall consistency in messages to students across campus. We also have started our Success Takes Practice program, which is our professional full-time academic life coach program at Texas Tech. And the goals for our Success Takes Practice program are to be student-centric, high-intensity conversations, substantive conversations, a lot of frequency. Our academic success coaches, our academic life coaches will stay on track with students throughout their careers, not only through alerts that might be shared with them, but even for those students who don't have alerts, to make sure that they're on campus. All of you know that we even, part of our retention risks are losing talented, well-prepared students and students in good standing. So we're not just doing things that are to protect against some of the loss attributed to students who might find themselves in poor academic standing at some point, but we're also trying to keep those students who remain in good academic standing throughout their career with us. We also focus on high accountability. We ask of our students some things who participate in this program so that they can stay on track, so that they can own their success. And then we're action-oriented. We make sure that in addition to making sure their degree plans look right, we're making sure that their other goals align with what else they want to achieve while they're students with us. And we hope that in the future, our academic life coaches can expand their services to students who have graduated. I'll just move on. So in addition, we focused on our high DF&W courses even more. We realized that sometimes we focus on success as an indicator of retention and graduation rates, but we also want course success or classroom success. And we noticed that in our high DF&W and drop courses that not only do we need to think about curriculum redesign, we need to think about pedagogy training, we also can integrate some of our centralized services that I've described to you as well. And that's what we're trying to do. In addition to doing supplemental instruction and having tutoring available, there seems that these particular courses require much more intensive interventions. Not just with what we've already been doing, but in addition to what we've been doing. I'm happy to take any questions if you have any.
All right, well, thank you for sharing. Congratulations, Texas. All right, and then the last of these for this panel is University of Texas at Permian Basin. We have Dr. John Indiasti. Let's see if I apologize if I said that wrong, and Dr. Michael Frawley. Their top areas of completion were in Hispanic completion at 39%, economically disadvantaged completions at 19%, male completion up 11%, and your 6-year graduation rate up 6 percentage points. 5 percentage points on the 6-year rate. So congratulations.
John decided not to join me up here so that we can keep this a little shorter and quicker by not going back and forth between two people. Plus, I think he just wants me up here to make a fool out of myself because I'm pretty good at that at times. So UT Permian Basin faces some very unique challenges because of where we are. We're smack dab in the middle of the oil field. So as you can see, ideas of like linear growth are things that we cannot hope for because as the oil field booms and busts, the number of students that go in and out of our university booms and busts. And it's absolutely completely out of our control, which means we had to come up with some very unique solutions to problems that we're facing with completion and graduation. I'm going to show you a couple of slides. I'm going to talk about how we got the numbers that we got out of this. But as you can see with our 4- and 6-year graduation rates, while there has been an increase over time, there are huge dips and gains based on when the oil field booms and busts. And the same thing with our 1-year retention rates. We'll get students that will come in, they will be here for a year, the oil field will boom, and they can get a job, you know, making $100,000 a year driving a truck, and they're out the door, and there's nothing we can do to convince them to stay, and they'll come back at the next cycle, and it really messes with our numbers. But the one thing we're really proud about, and this is where our planning comes in, is with the number of undergraduate degrees that we've awarded, you know, over the past 10 years. That has been a steady increase, and that's the goal that our new president has set for us, is to double the number of degrees that we award. And the one thing that we really like about this goal is that it's an understandable goal for the community and for the, you know, when you talk about 4- and 6-year graduation rates and 1-year retention rates, people kind of tune out. But if you know, if you can say we awarded X number of degrees, you can get people to buy in. So what we did is we had to figure out a way to get, you know, more people graduating. So what we did was we reorganized how we approached undergraduate success. About 7 years ago, we created a new department of undergraduate success with its own dean, and we gathered in a whole bunch of different departments that, quite frankly, never worked together before this point. So we were able to bring in advising, first-year experience, our success center where all of our tutoring and mentoring goes on, our retention office, and our testing services all in one spot. And we're a small university, so people wear a lot of hats. And what makes this great is every week the dean gets those people together to physically sit and look at each other and talk about what we're doing and how we can help each other as we go through these things. So when advising needs help on trying to, you know, get more people to come in to do their scheduling for the fall, he can work with freshman seminar. We can work with the Success Center to do those things. Now, and those things really work. Those weekly meetings really helped us, but we really didn't start gaining ground until we injected data into this. About 3 or 4 years ago, we added EAB. And by using EAB, we were able to target different problems that we were seeing. I mean, you know, we're using it like a lot of other places are using EAB as a central repository for things like advising and faculty interactions and all that. But what we also used it for is for its predictive courses. And I'm just going to give one example of a problem that we faced and how this team was able to solve this to be able to get these numbers. And that was the problem of online classes. We went far too heavily for a time into online classes because it appealed to students. The problem was, when we looked at the numbers, we were discovering that we were getting a whole bunch of first-generation, first-time in college students who, in their first semester and second semester of their freshman year, were taking sometimes 2 and 3 online classes. And they're not prepared for college yet, let alone doing online classes. I couldn't have done online classes when I was an undergrad. I didn't have the focus. It's too self-driven. So instead of, you know, throwing up our hands and saying, oh, online classes are horrible, which some of our faculty wanted to do, we found a way to approach that problem. We approached it in multiple ways. Advising started to encourage students to only take 1 online class. That way, they can get into the college environment and be used to it that way. But that meant we needed more in-person classes. So we had to make pitches to the administration to get more online classes. We included new elements in the freshman seminar of how to survive in an online environment. We increased our early alert system. We increased online tutoring, the online writing labs that we did. And this is how, and now our numbers for online class passing rates have increased quite a bit. And that's how we've done these things at UT Permian Basin. We find a problem, we do a small, sustainable change so that we can keep building on our successes rather than throwing all of our resources behind one big thing and hoping it works.
Thank you for sharing. All right, so thank you, everyone. I know one of the things that I heard is talking about some kind of measurable benchmarks or targets that you've set kind of across these presentations. So I'm going to pause for a minute and give you guys a couple of minutes with the folks next to you or behind you with your peer group. Take a couple of minutes and just what stuck out to you from these presentations. Is there anything else you'd like to learn about from any of the efforts that you just heard about?
I was like, wow, I gotta get right up on this. I forgot what the name of the category was. Other than I talked too fast. No, I didn't notice it.
wondered since we're getting...
All right, we're going to move on to the next set of presentations. And I will just to keep on track, so just 5 minutes for each of the presentations. So we're going to move into the graduation rate one. So in the next panel, you can see up on the slide here in just a second, kind of who's next. So the 4 institutions we're going to be hearing from are Angelo State University, UT Austin, Lamar University, and A&M Corpus Christi. And so first we're going to have Brandy Hawkins, Director of Accountability, come on up. They have increased their 4-year graduation rate by 11 percentage points, and they also had some completion outcomes as well. Overall completions, African-American completions up 30%, male completions up 9%. So thank you for joining us, and congratulations to Angelo State.
I think sometimes we think, oh, wow, how'd this happen? But actually, this for us was intentional. It's truly been a university-wide effort when we're doing this. We noticed the transfer problem several years ago when, we were not graduating our transfer students. And we're like, why is that? So as an institution, the freshman college, all of these other colleges started really looking at the data and coming into that. And so our provost and our president said, no, let's really look into this. And what we started to notice was prerequisite requirements. So when we started looking at the curriculum, we noticed that in several of our colleges, certain classes were being waived, or certain classes, like, why is it a prerequisite? So a couple of years ago, our provost gave a challenge out and asked every single college to go through all of their programs and look at every single prerequisite. And if they were waiving them or having other criteria for them or anything else, to really look at those. And so we did a prerequisite requirement, and when the deans had to process or approve any of those, they then had to go back and really relook at that. We also noticed that we had required minors. So we still have minors, but they are no longer required. So there's a couple programs that do have required minors, but for the most part, all of our other programs, they are no longer required, because it was taking our transfer students longer to graduate to be able to do that. So they can still do a minor, it's still an opportunity, but it is not required for most of our programs. And I think there were only 2 institutions in Texas who had that, where most of their degrees were required. Core curriculum. We revamped the core curriculum, the 090, and those pieces. And then the transfer student success initiatives were the degree evaluation. So we have DegreeWorks, students and transfer students. So all of our students are able to do this. They're able to log in. They have their information in there about what courses they currently have. And then they can do what-if analysis. What if I changed my major to this? How long will it take me to graduate? What does that look like? What if I changed to this program? And they can do all of those what-if analysis. That has been very, very helpful, because they're like, oh, wait, hold on. I could graduate this much faster if I move into this degree, and that has really helped as well. We also have car transfer scholarships, so students can get between $1,000 and $4,000 a year in transfer scholarships with different criteria, but that has really improved that transfer rate. And we're continuing to work on the transfer graduation rate and looking at different pieces as we're going through, and we're pulling lots of data. So this is still an initiative for us, and it's in progress. 4-year graduation rate. Our freshman college, as well as student affairs and enrollment management and many of our other areas, but in particular our freshman college initiatives, have really helped increase this. First year retention, I think, is most institutions, we all look at first year retention. Okay, what's going on, what's going on? But one of the things that we really started to look at was second year retention. Each college and or program has a second year retention committee, and we pulled a whole bunch of reports for those committees to look at and really start to look at it, where it has student information in it? What is their major? Did they change? How much money do they owe? Like really where they could drill down and start looking at what's happening and why we're not retaining them in that second year. Those committees are still very active, and we pull that data annually to help them make some of those decisions. But the freshman college initiatives, advising, academic coaching, I think it's the same thing that we've heard from all of the institutions. We do have an emphasis on undeclared and first generation students. We mark students who are at risk, and then those students are contacted by advisors in the freshman college, and they work with them. We also have SWAG, students with a goal. So they picture, plan, prepare, and pursue, and a lot of that is for some of our at-risk students. Although all students can participate in it if they would like to, but they target the students who are at risk and we're likely to lose either that first year or that second year. So, all right. Questions? Thank you.
Great, thank you so much. All right, next we have Carolyn Conrad from UT Austin. So their 4-year graduation rate is up 11 percentage points, and their 6-year graduation rate up another 3 percentage points, and their transfer graduation rate up 6 percentage points. So thank you.
Thank you very much, and I promised Jenna I would only speak for 5 minutes, even though I'm giving you 5 years of what we've done. So I'm going to go very quickly through these slides. As we say, it's strategies to help every student graduate. That's really our overall goal, is not just what we set here. Quickly review just UT Austin. I have 41,000 undergraduate students, so when we talk about moving the needle, we're talking about a very large group of students to get them to move. I also like to mention on our first time in college this past year, a lot of people think, oh, that you're UT Austin, you get only the best students. As a reminder, our middle 50% SAT scores, I have as many students that are below 1,200 that are above 1,460. So moving that needle is moving all of our students. University goal. We set a university goal to increase our graduation rate starting in 2013 is when the initiative started, from 52% to 70%. It was an ambitious goal, to say the least, and I'm very excited to say that we did hit it, if you can round from 69.8 to 70% this past year. Pleased to say that we hit 70%. We're very excited. Most important, though, for us is the increase that we had in our underserved students. Our black students went up 59.6%, Hispanic students 48%, the Pell Grant students 51% increase, and first gen up 50%. I think for everyone, that's the group that we really want to see an impact on, and that's where we saw the difference. Transfer students, it's interesting. Transfer students hasn't been our primary focus. We're starting to really focus on them now. But one of the things is when you change your culture on your campus, it really lifts everybody up. Everybody starts to participate more. So our transfer also went up. How did we do it? Number one, it starts with an institutional commitment. We had a commitment from the president to say we're going to increase our graduation rates. They gave us some funding, which also helps, of course, anytime you start new programs. But having that measurable goal, I think, is so critical for whatever it is, whether it's the completions of degrees or, in our case, the graduation rates. It makes a huge difference. Monthly meetings. I mean, I can't say this enough. We had monthly meetings. I had a meeting every Friday with either the student deans, got together once a month to talk about what are you doing, how are you doing it. Once a month we had a STEM council meeting. How are we improving math? What are we doing to help that? We had a writing council meeting once a month, and then once a month I had a course availability and registration slotting meeting with those folks as well. So every month for 3 years. I served lunches for the first year, and then we couldn't afford it anymore. We brought one, but got them there that way. And then assessment and reporting on a regular basis. So every year you can say, what are you doing, what's working and what's not working. Predictive analytics. We do not use an outside vendor. We didn't use EAB, Civitas, or anyone. We used our own research analysts to come up with predictive models. We started with a predicted grad rate for our incoming students using Apply Texas data. What data did we have that you could go back 12 years and say, what are the factors that you know before the students arrive on your campus that's going to tell you the student is least likely to graduate in 4 years? So we could identify those students that that 25% of our bottom 25% that we had the funding to say, let's do something more with them, we could identify them before they got there. Then we also created, after that first year, we started saying, what do we need to do in the next year, et cetera, to create new models to say, what things can we do that's going to change? Someone who comes in who has a low predicted grad rate may in 2 years have dropped off the radar, have dropped. And conversely, somebody who came in with a low one is doing great, getting, a 4.0 in calculus and sciences, and all of a sudden then they're not as important. But it's looking at the data on a regular basis. Student success programs, we made sure that 25% of our incoming class, that bottom quartile of students, is in a success program in their freshman year. That included supplemental instruction, peer mentoring, small group communities, et cetera. That was one of the places that we really put funding in the colleges, and all those success programs are based in those colleges. Building community. We're a big school. A lot of people, it's like, oh my gosh, they did not feel like they were part of the class when they came in. Everybody wants to be a Longhorn, but if you don't belong, we all know the research, how important belonging is. At the time, Dr. Laudy, who was running this, said, Carolyn, I want you to make sure that every student is in 20-person group. And I was like, how? And this was, I think, in April, he told us, for that September. And we said, how are we ever going to do this? And we said, well, let's look at what's already out there, but let's rebrand it. So we called it 360 Connections, so that every student would be in a small group community. That's first-year interest groups. It could be an honors program, could be a success program, could be within a dorm, residential living learning community. But identified and have a way so that you can have a database to say every student gets assigned to something and that they have a small community. And then Class F campaigns. We never did this at UT Austin. The big, publics, and the privates do it, is that when you arrive on campus, you're part of a cohort. You are. So we started what we called the first group was Texas 17. When they came in the fall of 2013, they all had a branded logo. It was on their T-shirts. It was on everything. We're now Texas 23 is going to be my incoming group of who's going to start in fall of 2019. They walk around now with it, and I knew we had changed the campus culture when I saw our Daily Texan student, had a comic of some kind of political cartoon, and the student had Class of 2016 and Class of 2015 on the T-shirts in the cartoon, and it had nothing to do with that. And I was like, wow, we're really changing the culture. So that's, I think, is huge. If the students come in and have that expectation they're going to graduate, that helps them to start to say, how do I get there? Supporting all students, as I said, once you start with that first group, you've got to continue. Progress to degree is something that we do audit, so that now it started with spreadsheets and now it's automated in Tableau, so that we can send it out to the advisors to say, these students are more likely to graduate. These, are off track or not based on their taking courses to complete their degree requirements, not just total courses, but is it completing their degree requirements? Graduation help desk was something we started. We're very happy that UT System funded that, so that all the system schools now have a graduation help desk. That was a really simple thing. It was like, we all have administrative barriers. A student comes along and says, I need to get in this class. It's only 60 students, but I need this class in the spring to graduate. And the faculty member would say, too bad. You'll have them come back in the fall. And instead, being in the provost office, we would be able to go back and reach out to that faculty member or to the department chair or to a dean and say, hey, this student needs to graduate. Can you please make one more seat and make room for it? It's a huge difference for us to be able to do that. And then Texas Advanced Commitment is something we started in the last couple of years, really, which is to make sure that we give as much as possible new financial aid. It's one of the things I keep talking about. The thing that's going to help students graduate is if they can afford to be in our schools and not have as much debt. And so now we've created to have more funding so that every student up to a $30,000 adjusted gross income tuition is covered, and then they guarantee aid if it's up to $100,000 adjusted gross income. And that's it. Every student graduates. Did I make it in 5 minutes? Almost. Thank you.
Questions for Carolyn? All right. Thank you so much. Okay, next we're going to highlight Lamar University, who's increased their four-year graduation rate 7 percentage points in the last 2 years. And we have Craig Escamilla. Yes? Okay, Executive Director, Retention Student Services. So, thank you.
Thank you very much. Good morning, everyone. Thanks very much for the opportunity to come and talk about a few things that we're doing here at Lamar University. Just give you a little bit of information about the institutional profile real quick. So we've got total enrollment of just under 15,000. About 40% of these of the FTIC students are conditionally admitted, meaning that they're sort of individually approved for admission to the university. We're looking at a large first-generation population, large commuter population from the 3 county surrounding area for the institution. This is in Beaumont, Texas, which is just inside the Louisiana-Texas border. We've got a freshman and sophomore persistence rate of about 64%, and you can see the change in the 4-year graduation rates, so somewhere around 9 or 10% to about 16, 17%. So that's a little bit about the institution. What have we been doing? Well, not much that you haven't already heard, which is good that for us to hear that we're moving in the right direction. So lots of focus on retention and graduation grants, again, with a large first-generation population having to spend some time looking at the non-academic issues that are, barriers to these students making forward progress. We're kind of focusing on 3 groups with these. Obviously, the students that are close to their degree and some financial support to get them over that edge and complete. And then 2 groups of students on the retention side, the students that have financial barriers to forward progress, and those students that are leaving to go to other institutions. What can we do to sort of incentivize them to stay? We've really increased a lot of efforts on data analytics. We are also using EAB's platform, so really diving into the data, kind of understanding who the students are, what are the issues that are slowing their progress to degree or that are causing them to leave the institution. Lots of emphasis on academic progress reports and working with faculty to give us some of the real-time data that we really have to have that is the best source of information to know where we have students that are at risk. We've seen a lot of improvements in the response rate on progress reports, and we've made a lot of efforts, particularly over just this last year, to increase communication across the campus about the importance of progress reports, what we're doing as a result of the information that's shared with us, and so on. Looking now as we go forward at trying to increase the personalization of support for specific student populations, so a different type of service for transfer students, a different type of service for the conditionally admitted students, a different type of service for honor students, so that everybody gets a little more customized, a little more personalized experience. Our kind of motto right now on campus is 1 student at a time, so we're really kind of taking that a little bit to an extreme here. We do have centralized advising through 60 hours with professional advisors in our undergraduate advising center. That's been in place for about 5 years now, so much of the results that we're seeing is a result of that and some of the efforts there. We have an academic success coach program where we have an academic success coach in each of our 5 colleges. We'll have another one probably in place soon for our largest college over the next few months. And we've also created this idea of sort of coordinated care units or success networks where we're increasing the coordination communication between a number of different student service departments on campus to try to ensure that we're really managing these cases of individual students, that there's a smoother handoff from one department to another, that students are getting as consistent an experience as possible from the student services side of the institution. We have a wonderful student tutoring and retention services office that works they have a peer coaching program that we call LU Success, and actually have just gotten some really cool ideas. Thank you from Texas Tech and UT for some really good ideas of how we might expand that program and what they're doing. And also we have, of course, a tutoring center, writing center, and those things, and I've mentioned EAB as well. So that's a little bit of what we've been doing, what we're doing, and how we're kind of moving some of these efforts forward. So thanks for the recognition.
Thank you. Wonderful. Thank you so much. All right, and last but not least, we have Texas A&M Corpus Christi, Katie Bottinger, and will Erin also? Okay, all right. So the 4-year graduation rate improvement up 7 percentage points, but also some completion improvements for completion overall up 8%, Hispanic completion up 19%, and then male completion up 16%. So thank you so much. Great.
Thank you. And I do not have a PowerPoint. And when I get done, you'll understand why, because we're swimming upstream. But so for us, I think it's really, I've only been at A&M Corpus Christi for about 15 months. And so I came in at a time, a changing of the guard, if you will. We had a new president with Dr. Quintanilla, new to the position, but not new to the university. She's been there 25 years. And so we really grew very rapidly over a short number of years, stressing all of the infrastructure at the university. We kind of went from a leader in retention and graduation rates in the system to kind of the worst amongst our friends. And so the president really, when I was hired for planning and institutional research and strategic initiatives, she really said, here's what we're doing. We have got to straighten up our act. We have to do better by our students. And so there's been this concerted effort, and it's very decentralized, but we're doing some really cool things to help support the astronomical growth that we've had. We've kind of flattened out. We've agreed to kind of hold enrollment for a year or two until we can get caught up. But some of the areas of success that we've seen are in our athletic programs. So we have very high GPAs amongst our athletes, a lot of academic support for them, a lot of mandatory things. My daughter is a Division I athlete there, so some of it's mandatory, but it really works. And so what you find is that the students engage on a different level. We have tons of individual grant projects, College of Nursing, College of Education, College of Engineering, I'll talk about just briefly, particularly with our mechanical engineers, doing a lot of things with them. We have an above average national graduation, we are above average with the graduation rate for our engineering students, and that has been meaningful. Teaching them, a lot of the grant stuff is in soft skills, but it gets them to engage in a way that I think engineering hasn't engaged previously. And I only know that because I've actually been over there really looking at that program, and it's been so interesting to me to see the success over there. We've done a complete revamp of our advising, creating a university college under Dr. Jarrell, and really realigning our advising services, how we function, moving degree works out from underneath advising back over to the registrar where it should have been, and doing some other things, really straightening up the graduation plans, getting our course rotations in place, making sure that we're staying on top of all those important pieces. And I think that's been a big addition for us. And just students understand what it takes to get out, right? I mean, the student has to have a roadmap if they're going to finish. And so we've really been tightening that up over the past 18 months or so. So we're about 14 months in to a $5 million overhaul of enrollment management and the student experience. And so when I was hired in, it was all about the student experience and what that would look like. Some of these things were already underway, obviously, but we're building on that work with degree works, with graduation concierge, all of those things that we think we need to help the student navigate what are really processes that aren't always easy, right? So we have standards that we have to meet for accreditation, and so sometimes we have forms and policies that get in the way of really basic things like, how do I register to do this, or how do I get over this hurdle? So we want to make sure that we put all those support pieces in place for the student, but we've reimagined everything from initial inquiry all the way through the student life cycle. And so we are 14 months into that. We are putting in 8 new software applications, a complete relaunch of TargetX. When we grow up, we want to be just like Jamie at Texas Tech, their enrollment management area. But really, it's an exciting project for us. And what it's given us is really the ability to align our processes, our policies, our systems, and integrate those things that need to talk to each other. The piece that I'll say is most important in all of this is we have presidential support. Dr. Cantanilla is amazing. If you've not met her, she's an outstanding leader and just really has supported this from day one. But she's not just supported it with what she says and the authority she provides to us, but she's backed it up with $5 million. And so that has enabled us to be able to move forward and be able to do some of these things. But it's allowed us to break down departmental and cross-divisional silos. I don't know about you all, you probably don't have any, but we have lots of these things called silos. And it amazed me. I took over the direct supervision of enrollment management a few months ago, and I couldn't believe that even within an admissions department, undergrad and grad couldn't share resources. I'm like, I'm sorry, what? You can't? No? Okay. So anyway, so we've just really had kind of a come to Jesus moment, if you will, where we're just, that doesn't work anymore. We have to work with each other. We have to work cross-divisionally. I meet every week, actually, usually almost every day I talk to these guys, but the AVP for over in IT with programmers and software, and then the Dean of University College as well. We just stay in that constant loop of this project's moving, we've got this, you know, and so it's really all about the communication. And at the end of the day, it's the data, right? So the data tells us where to go. The president provides the support, and so hopefully we'll keep going there.
Well, a big congratulations to everybody. Thank you for your hard work this year. I do want you to do one more thing for me. Take 2 minutes, and I really do want you not to just talk to the person who's from your institution. I see a lot of friends talking to friends. Turn around. We're gonna have this row talk to this row talk to this row. Turn around, and one thing that you heard today that piqued your interest. One thing you heard today from all the presentations, maybe from the last 3 presentations, something you're going to walk out of here thinking about.
And then my desktop is super fast, so. Yeah, so it was one of those things where I was like, ooh, I can get you guys' desktop versus I can get an OK laptop for the same price. So I got one. Yeah, thank you. Did you just find out today? Yeah, and they just sent the notes right before we started. Thank you. I hope they're okay with it. I took some liberty with their notes for their last meeting.
It's fine. Yeah, good. I know that can be a little disconcerting to find out at the last minute, but Jennifer felt like she's talking so much.
Oh, no, she asked me first and I was fine with it. So
Thank you for doing that. I know it's hard sometimes last minute just to.
It's always weird when you're filling in for somebody else.
Yeah, I know.
Their stuff.
Very much for doing that.
And my last job on I was shocked to find, I mean, because Rivera, we're pretty far behind, and a lot of things still Actually, I got the Want me to go to the wrap-up screen?
So, all right, thank you, everyone. So we are nearing time. I really appreciate the discussion, and take a few moments to wrap up. As you walk out, I hope you'll continue these discussions because it sounded like they were very robust. And I heard a couple of things that kind of piqued my interest. One of them was, how do you fund XYZ? So that's something that I want to think about kind of for the future. If people are doing interesting things, that may be one of the key questions. So kind of one or two big things you're doing, and then maybe with an eye on some of that information, because that's what people want to know. How the heck do you do this? So just as part of wrap up, just wanted to make sure that you know that there's an evaluation should be in your inbox, maybe now or in a few moments. If you would just take a couple of minutes to let us know how this went and then any ideas you have for next year. One question I want to ask you in particular to think about, and you can include it in your evaluation, is that for the last 2 years we focused on completion outcomes, and there's part of me that thinks that we should stick on one thing for kind of 3 years, just because let's kind of maintain some focus and look at some progress and have kind of a cadence of looking at this. But I would also be open, if you would like to look at other areas, we could make a shift in terms of the top improver analysis and what we really focus on for that piece. So if you have any feedback on that, please let us know and use the evaluation for that. And otherwise, I'm going to say thank you so much for joining us and being such great participants today. And I'm going to pass it to Julie to
And I'm just going to second that. Thank you all for coming. If you do open any boarding schools on your campuses, let me know. But again, thank you very, very much. We appreciate all your great work.